Chapter 250. Chapter 250. Feng Yin makes another move. After chatting for a while with Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujia, Ling Han returned to his room, where he played with Hun Yo for a while. Then, he began his massive shopping trip. He had decided to move into the Black Tower. This was the very safest place in the whole world. Moreover, if he encountered any danger, was imprisoned by someone, or was trapped in some kind of dangerous place, he could entirely live for a while in the Black Tower in rest and relaxation, waiting calmly for the danger to pass. Bed, chairs, table, as well as various kinds of food. Anyways, the first level of the Black Tower was overwhelmingly large anyways, being practically a world of its own. In, he could also bring chickens, ducks, pigs, goats, and cows in. He could even dig a pond or a stream to rear fish, making it into a self-sufficient separate world. Ling Han asked Small Tower about the possibility of such a thing, and Small Tower confirmed that this was indeed possible. The space within the Black Tower was indeed capable of becoming just like a mystery realman independent world. Because he was busy with his own matters, he did not pay any attention to the fact that Lu Yutong had not come by for a few days. Meanwhile, a growing variety of miscellaneous items appeared within the originally monotonous space inside the Black Tower. Ling Han had not only grown spirit grass, but also ordinary trees, grass, as well as a vegetable field. He had originally worried about the fact that these plants would quickly wither since 1 year inside the Black Tower was equivalent to 1,000 years in the outside world, but the reality of the matter was not so. Time in the space in the first level of the Black Tower was not sped up, because though it was said that 1 year was equal to 1,000 years, it was actually referring to the fact that time could be sped up to a maximum of 1,000 years, and not that it would really be as long as 1,000 years. After only growing them for a couple of days, the vegetables here were obviously growing extremely well and could completely be harvested for food. But afterwards, they did not die of age, and instead grew stronger and stronger, looking like they were heading in the direction of becoming giants. For example, the carrots directly grew out of the ground as if they had become big trees. Ling Han dug out some and made a meal of it. Guang Yuan, Zhu Wujia, and Hun Yo all exclaimed that it was delicious. Ling Han tried some himself, and the taste was indeed extremely delicious. It was not that he was a very good cook, but the ingredient itself was too excellent on its own. Ling Han also set out a number of areas in the Black Tower for rearing chickens, goats, pigs, and cows. These animals fed on the plants growing in the herb garden and sometimes would even eat some lower-grade spirit grass. After rearing them for a short while, most probably these chickens, goats, pigs, and cows would also become extremely delicious. What a good chance of getting fine food. Ling Han had killed Feng Luo. Previously, because the Devil Sky Mystery Realm had just opened, it had not created much of a ruckus, but now that he had returned, and the matter of the Devil Sky Mystery Realm had also ended, logically, there should be a lot of people coming to make trouble with him. However, the truth of the matter was it was as if nothing had happened at all, and everything was astonishingly peaceful. On the 5th day, a sudden big piece of news exploded in the whole of the imperial city. The princess of the Lu clan, one of the 8 great clans, Lu Yutong, was going to get married. One of the 2 beauties of the imperial city, Lu Yutong, was going to get married. Who was the groom? All of a sudden, the whole imperial city was stirred up. The young men of all the clans, no matter the size of the clan, were all struck with envy and jealousy, but were at the same time curious about the identity of the groom. Who was the man who had actually managed to achieve the feat of bringing home everyone's dream girl and dream? It was actually Feng Ming. Who was Feng Ming? And what relationship did he have with Feng Luo? The answer was very quickly revealed. Feng Ming was Feng Yan's cousin, and was currently 20 years old. He was a completely ignorant and incompetent guy, previously known as the 2 trashes of the Feng clan together with Feng Luo. He had not even broken through to the element-gathering tier yet, but was avid of all the vices: feasting, drinking, womanizing, and gambling. How could such a piece of trash be qualified to get married with Lu Yutong? And how could the Lu clan actually agree to marry such a genius elite like Lu Yutong to such a piece of crap? The Lu clan were not idiots. Not only were they not idiots, They were also one of the 8 great clans of the imperial city, and were only beneath the imperial family in terms of power. Then what kind of benefit had Feng Yin thrown onto the table, or perhaps what threats had he issued, that forced the Liu clan to make this decision? The Liu clan had already spread out the news. 3 days from now would be the day of the marriage between Liu Yutong and Feng Ming. All the young men of the imperial city were absolutely defiant and rebellious upon hearing this news. What right did Feng Ming have to marry Liu Yutong? Even such a piece of trash could manage to embrace an extreme beauty. Wasn't that like a harsh slap to everyone's faces? However, there were still many who were in the know. Wasn't Liu Yutong Ling Han's woman? Why was she suddenly getting married with Feng Ming? What was going on here? The enmity between Feng clan and Ling Han was no secret. He had first crippled Feng Luo's arms, then killed him off directly. This was definitely considered a life-or-death enmity. It would not end unless one side was completely defeated. Now Feng Ming was going to publicly marry Liu Yutong. Wasn't that a slap to Ling Han's face then? Definitely. Allowing a piece of trash to marry Liu Yutong? Not only was it a slap to Ling Han's face, it was a slap strong enough to make his face swell. If Ling Han could still tolerate this matter, then how would he be able to face others in the future? Interesting, very interesting. There was definitely going to be an exiting show at the wedding 3 days later. When the news spread into Ling Han's ears, he was slightly stunned before he realized that Liu Yutong had not come by these few days. It was not because that she was too busy to come visit, but because she should have been placed under house arrest by the Liu clan and had no way to leave at all. She was his little female attendant. Ling Han tapped the table lightly. The wedding would be held 3 days later, which meant that Feng Yin had long returned to the imperial city and was now naturally aware that Feng Luo had died by his hand. However, this guy actually bore with it and did not directly charge here to battle him to death. Instead, Feng Yin called Feng Ming over from Yuan City and had the latter marry Liu Yutong to humiliate Ling Han. In the eyes of others, he should be a romantic young man. He had 2 such extremely beautiful women by his side, so he definitely had to be extremely fond of the 2 of them. Thus, Feng Yin arranged for Feng Ming to rob him of what he cherished as a strike against Ling Han. This was already proof enough of the depths of the hatred Feng Yin held for him. He was no longer satisfied with destroying Ling Han's mortal body, but instead wanted to drive him to madness first and have Ling Han die in deepest despair. What could be more horrible than watching the woman he loved get married with a piece of trash, then rush over to try and stop the wedding but instead be killed? There was nothing wrong with Feng Yan's thought process. Although Ling Han did not think of Liu Yutong as his woman, with his personality of protecting his own people, how could he allow his little female attendant be forced into matrimony? Which meant that he was definitely going to make a big fuss at the wedding 3 days later, but the question was, how? His cultivation was now only in the gushing spring tier, and he did not have the right to command the Liu clan, which was one of the 8 great clans. If they really came to blows, even if he had the Black Tower to instill power into him and forcibly upgrade his cultivation level to the spiritual ocean tier, the Liu clan had a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier on standby. Even if he was in the spiritual ocean tier, it was as easy as turning over his hand to completely suppress him for such a powerful elite. If he revealed the Black Tower, then he would definitely be able to eliminate all in his way. But there was too much involved in that. Small Tower said that it was possible that the true ultimate existences would be drawn out, and the final conclusion would definitely end with his death and the Black Tower being snatched away. What could he do that would allow him to both save his little female attendant and retreat unscathed? Brat, are you planning to attend the wedding? After hearing the news, both Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiu came over. Ling Han laughed and said, "With Big Brother Guang to protect me, even if it was the lair of a dragon or the den of a tiger, I would dare to charge in." Guang Yuan's face instantly darkened. What kind of place was the Liu clan? That was a place that had an elite of spiritual pedestal tier on standby. What was the point of a weakling going over then, to purposely look for a beating? He hurriedly waved his hands continuously in adamant refusal and said, "I'm not going to accompany you to your death." Yet Zhu Wujiu said, "Young Master Han, I shall go with you." He was a loyal man. When he saw Ling Han was intending to create trouble at the wedding for his girlfriend, his blood started boiling in excitement. Additionally, it was only because of Ling Han that he had managed to obtain his vengeance, and he also owed Ling Han his life. So what if it was the Liu clan? He would still charge in no matter what. You two foolish brats, fuck going. The Liu clan has an elite of spiritual pedestal tier on standby. The two of you going is practically delivering yourselves up to die. Guang Yuan said with a roll of his eyes. To battle for love, I would not regret it even if I died 100 times. Zhu Wujiu declared passionately. Ling Han rubbed his chin and said, I would of course not do something like delivering myself up to die pointlessly. Let's first head to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. Chapter 251. Chapter 251. Getting Ready. Ling Han had long since been approved as a black-grade high-level alchemist. However, it was a very long process from verification all the way until he was actually presented with his proof of identity. However, over 2 months should be more than enough to have everything settled completely. The status of a black-grade high-level alchemist was equivalent to gaining a life-saving golden plaque. He brought Hunyo along with him to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. Young Master Han. Young Master Han's here. After Xiao Ying came forward to receive them in the main hall, various other alchemists too came forward to pay their greetings, all of them looking at Ling Han excitedly. Ling Han nodded with a smile and asked Fu Yuansheng, Is the verification for my alchemist's status complete? It's been completed for a long time. However, because young Master Han had been in the Devil Sky Mystery Realm all this while, I did not have the opportunity to present it to you. Please allow me to bring it to you. Fu Yuansheng personally rushed to fetch a brocade case and presented it to Ling Han respectfully. Ling Han received it from him. Aside from 3 silver plaques, there was also a crystal-like object within. As long as origin power was injected inside this object, it would be activated and form a screen, on which Ling Han's name, the date of his verification as a black-grade high-level alchemist, as well as his witness were clearly writ. Young Master Han, to tell you the truth, our Heaven's Medicine Pavilion belongs to the Alchemist Society, and the Alchemist Society is an organization that includes all the alchemists of this land. It is in charge of verifying the grade of alchemists, as well as working for the benefit of all alchemists. Young Master Han has not yet reached the age of 20, but is already a black-grade high-level alchemist. This has caused a stir in the branch at the 9 nations of the desolate north, and the various Grandmaster alchemists have all expressed their hopes that young Master Han could pay a visit to the Star Brilliance Palace Hall. Fu Yuansheng explained with a smile, his eyes filled with an envy that he could not hide. The Star Brilliance Palace Hall was the highest-ranking branch that the Alchemist Society had in the 9 nations of the desolate north, and there were 7 Earth-grade alchemists on standby within. All of them were the really important people in this area, and now they actually said they wanted to see Ling Han. What kind of great honor was that? Ling Han did not take this seriously at all. Instead, he felt a little uncomfortable. Telling him to pay them a visit? What right did they have to do that? If they want to see me, then just let them come themselves. For the moment, I have no intentions to leave Rain Country yet, Ling Han said calmly. Some wanted to rebuke him right at that moment, but they recalled Ling Han's monstrous ability and how he was a black-grade high alchemist who could actually concoct foundation-building pills that were close to Earth-grade, which meant that he already had half a foot into the ranks of Earth-grade alchemists. Thus, any ordinary Earth-grade alchemist really did not have the right to issue any commands to Ling Han. This, Fu Yuansheng wiped off the sweat covering his forehead. In his opinion, being able to visit the Star Brilliance Palace Hall was the stuff of dreams for every alchemist. But in Ling Han's case, not only was he completely uninterested, he instead wanted the extremely noble Grandmaster alchemists to pay him a personal visit. Ling Han gave a wave of his hand and said, Let's just put this matter aside for the moment. There is another matter that I would like to request your help on. You need only say the word, young Master Han, Fu Yuansheng hurriedly said with a bow, looking as if Ling Han was honoring him by simply requesting for his help. Ling Han nodded and asked, The Liu clan is planning to marry off their daughter 3 days from now. Are you aware of this matter? Yes. Fu Yuansheng took a look at Ling Han and hesitated slightly, but still continued. According to the information that has spread out from the Liu clan, Feng Yu is already a disciple of the Winter Moon sect and is a core disciple. That's why the Liu clan has agreed to this marriage. Nonsense. Ling Han shook his head. Even if it was Feng Yin who wanted to marry Liu Yutong, the Liu clan might not agree either. Because although the Winter Moon sect was powerful, there were still two black-grade high-level alchemists standing behind Ling Han, so he too had his powerful backers. On the other hand, what benefits would the clan obtain from having their daughter marry a disciple of the Winter Moon sect? Once a daughter has married out of the clan, that was equivalent to water that has been poured out. An alliance by marriage would usually only have symbolic meaning. For example, how many princesses of the imperial family have been married out all these years? Most of them had been married into the 8 great clans, but the 8 great clans were still the 8 great clans, and none of them had gotten any closer to the imperial family. On the other hand, the 8 great clans were still united together for additional security, opposing the imperial family both on the surface and secretly. The Winter Moon sect was not located in the 9 nations of the desolate north. If they really abruptly extended their hands into this area, it would first engender the displeasure of the imperial family. The imperial family would naturally not dare to actually oppose the Winter Moon sect publicly, but how could they not make life difficult for the Liu clan? Thus, even if the Liu clan married Liu Yutong off to Feng Yin, that would only be a symbolic union. What more when the groom was Feng Ming? According to Ling Han's deductions, Feng Yin must have given some kind of benefit to the Liu clan, and this benefit was great enough to cause the Liu clan to agree to sacrificing a talented elite who was their daughter. Young Master Han, the Winter Moon sect has a powerful elite of spiritual infant tier in their ranks. Unless the few grandmasters of the Star Brilliance Palace Hall appeared, this would not be easily resolved. He knew that the matter that Ling Han wanted his help on was definitely related to Liu Yutong's wedding. Ling Han smiled and said, "It does not have to be so troublesome. It is merely one Feng Yin. By that time, you only need to bring some people to keep up appearances for me. There would be no need to take action." Fu Yuansheng quickly nodded. Merely helping keep up appearances was of course no issue. He was one of the 2 great bosses of alchemy in Rain Country. Even the Liu clan would not dare to say anything against him. Moreover, he still had the colossal entity that was the Alchemist Society behind him. Even the Winter Moon sect would not dare to really do anything to him. Ling Han was also a black-grade high-level alchemist, and was one that had a foot into the ranks of Earth-grade. Even the higher ranks of the Winter Moon sect would have to treat such a person politely. What more when Feng Yin was only the disciple of one of their lower ranks? With such thoughts, Fu Yuansheng dismissed his worries. Whether Ling Han was able to snatch back Liu Yutong was another issue, but at least he himself would not be facing any danger. However, would Ling Han really be able to snatch Liu Yutong back? The Liu clan was marrying off one of their daughters. No matter how much of a piece of trash she was being married off to, for the sake of the Liu clan's reputation and pride, they would definitely not stand idly by and just watch Ling Han take away the bride. Putting aside their most powerful member at spiritual pedestal tier, merely a few spiritual ocean tier martial artists standing out would be enough to take care of Ling Han. What was Ling Han really intending to do? Fu Yuansheng was very curious, but Ling Han did not say anything further, and after excusing himself, left quickly. In the next 2 days, Feng Yin kept up an especially high profile. He challenged the 3rd Imperial Prince, Ken Yi, and Zhao Huan, the 3 core disciples, one after another, and emerged victorious by completely dominating his opponents. As this was not the challenge competition that would be held at the end of the year, thus even if he had won, he could not become a core disciple. However, everyone knew by now that Feng Yin had become a true disciple of the Winter Moon sect, and this identity was above the identity of a core disciple of Huyang Academy by who knows how many times. Feng Yin was definitely going to leave Rain Country. Thus, he was obviously showing off his might, wanting to really make his name known before he left, stepping on all the geniuses of Rain Country on his way up. According to those who had watched the battles, Feng Yin had already reached the 9th layer of the Gushing Spring tier by now. If he could still take one further step into the spiritual ocean tier, then with his current age, He could be considered to have made history in Rain Country as the youngest ever spiritual ocean tier martial artist. Compared to Feng Yan's high profile, Ling Han kept up an extremely low profile. He sat all day inside his courtyard, being extremely patient. Qi Yongyi and the others had all paid him a visit, wanting to comfort him. It was obvious that Feng Yan had laid out a trap for Ling Han and was waiting for him to step right into this trap on the day of the wedding. At that time, both the Liu clan and Feng Yan would have enough reason to kill Ling Han on the spot. How have you broken through to the gushing spring tier already? They had yet to begin comforting him when they experienced a tremendous shock as they realized what cultivation level Ling Han was currently at. Chapter 252. Chapter 252, Persuasion. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, I have only just broken through to the gushing spring tier. What need is there for you to be so surprised? What need was there for them to be so surprised? You had to understand that out of this group of people, the earliest among them who reached the 9th layer of the element gathering tier had managed to do so in 2 years ago, yet they were still at the 9th layer of the element gathering tier even now. And what about him? A few months ago, he was only in the 4th layer of the element gathering tier, yet now he'd left them far behind and stepped into the gushing spring tier. And this was still not enough to astonish them? This was practically a fatal shock. Ling Han, you're stimulating universal anger with this. Just take a look at how many miserable people here are still stuck at the peak of the element gathering tier. Qi Yongyi immediately shouted. Even Bailey Tangyun was nodding repeatedly in agreement. He too was in the 9th layer of the element gathering tier, and now possessed the qualifications to attempt breaking through to the gushing spring tier. However, there was a deep moat that separated being qualified to attempt breaking through and having actually broken through, and this moat required who knows how much time to fill. If one was fortunate enough, he might be able to fill this moat before he reached 25 years old. But Ling Han wasn't even 18 yet. In the field of martial arts, these few years could not be ignored. If one was unable to break through to the flower-blossoming tier, every martial artist was still mortal and could possess a lifespan of merely 100 years. That's right. Everyone was both jealous and at the same time, happy for Ling Han. You're already in the gushing spring tier even before you've reached 18. In the history of Rain Country, you could probably be counted amongst the top 10, right? Li Dongyu asked ruefully. Ling Han merely smiled. If these people were to find out that Hun Yo was already in the 9th layer of the element gathering tier, who knows how extremely shocked they would become. However, Hun Yo had a particular ability that could conceal her aura, and if it was not for the fact that he still had a sliver of divine sense left behind from heaven tier, he would not have been able to sense her aura, either. Not even Guang Yuan was aware that the little girl had already reached the 9th layer of the element gathering tier, and only thought her to be a slightly stranger child than most since she was always so energetic, as well as such a humongous glutton. Moreover, she was extraordinarily strong. Ling Han, will you be attending tomorrow's wedding? The others finally came to the main topic. Why not? Ling Han countered. That's the Liu clan, Qi Yongyi said with a frown. So what if it is the Liu clan? Ling Han asked with a smile. After being countered consecutively by Ling Han for 2 times straight, the others did not know what else they could say. It was obvious that Ling Han did not take the Liu clan seriously at all. Big brother Ling, I'll go with you tomorrow, Li Hao forced out through gritted teeth. After being helped out by Ling Han so many times, it was now time for him to repay some of his debts. Me too, Jin Wuji said in a deep voice. Meanwhile, Zhu Wuju merely smacked the hilt of his sword lightly and gazed at him with sharp eyes that were filled with determination. Qi Yongyi and the others all sighed. A few months ago, Jin Wuji and Ling Han were still enemies, but now he was willing to risk everything for Ling Han's sake. Similarly, a few months ago, Ling Han and the Feng clan were enemies, but not only had their enmity not been resolved, but their relations had degraded into something that would not end without one side being wiped out completely. Life was indeed full of mysteries. Ling Han waved his hand and said, "You should all go and watch the excitement tomorrow. However, I will not allow any of you to make a move." When Qi Yongyi, Li Dongyu and the others heard Ling Han inviting them to go with him. They could not help but become anxious. They did not have the courage to oppose the Liu clan, but when they heard Ling Han's last few words, they could not help but flush. Even if Ling Han needed help, it would definitely not fall onto them who were still in the element-gathering tier. They really had much too high an opinion of themselves. Ling Han's eyes swept over Zhu Wujiu and the other two. His strict gaze caused the three of them to nod subconsciously, not daring to say anything further. Hee, then I too have no need to make a move, right? Guang Yuan said with a laugh. Ling Han laughed and said, if no one battles me, then there is naturally no need for Big Brother Guang to act. But if there are really any powerful elites, then Big Brother Guang, as my bodyguard, should naturally display your usefulness. With your ability and reputation, Big Brother Guang, you would at least be able to battle 10 opponents on your own. I say, Brat Ling, are you trying to cause trouble for me? Instantly, Guang Yuan looked miserable. Ling Han merely smiled. If Guang Yuan did not retreat tomorrow, then he would not mind giving a hand to Guang Yuan, and in the future, not just the spiritual pedestal tier, it was definitely not impossible for Guang Yuan to reach the flower blossoming tier, or even the spiritual infant tier. However, he was not a good Samaritan. So how could he simply give out such a big favor for no price at all? If one wanted to get him to train them, then one needed to prove that they were qualified to become his friend and earn his trust. As of now, Li Hao and Zhu Wujiu had passed, whereas Jin Wuji had to be observed for a while longer. Qi Yongyi, Bailey Tengyun, and the others, meanwhile, could only pass as casual friends. Qi Yongyi and the others continued to persuade him for a while longer, but when they saw Ling Han was completely unmoved, they could only leave helplessly. The third imperial prince arrived quietly not long after. I had never thought that Feng Yin has actually become a disciple of the Winter Moon sect, and has even been taken in as a disciple by a powerful elite of the spiritual infant tier. The third imperial prince said as soon as he had stepped through the doors. His face was filled with envy, as well as defiance. At first, he was the strongest young genius of his age range, and the leader of the 3 core disciples of Huyang Academy, but yesterday, he was challenged by Feng Yin and completely defeated. This had to be because Feng Yin had obtained the secret inheritance of the Winter Moon sect, and also the reason why he had been able to surpass him in cultivation and defeat him easily. What gave him the right? Feng Yin was merely a true disciple of Huyang Academy, whereas he was an imperial prince of Rain Country and a core disciple. Why had the Winter Moon sect chosen Feng Yin instead of him? This caused the third imperial prince to feel both envy and hatred. Ling Han smiled faintly. The third imperial prince's flustered and exasperated display caused his opinion of the former to instantly fall quite considerably, and he could not even bother with the latter's resentful complaints and merely pretended as if he had not heard a single word. Ling Han, what are your plans tomorrow? The third imperial prince asked seriously. This was his real purpose for coming. Ling Han looked at the third imperial prince and asked, what plans does your imperial highness want me to have tomorrow? The third imperial prince could not help but smile. In his eyes, Ling Han was merely a stepping stone for him on his way to ascend the throne, and he had never considered Ling Han as a friend, so everything had to be done for his benefit first and foremost. He said, Feng Yin is currently very powerful, but not long after, he will leave Rain Country, so I am hoping you can bear with it for the moment. What your Imperial Highness means is that I should stay here tomorrow. Ling Han asked calmly. I know that girl from the Liu clan is an outstanding beauty, but how could we who do great things be troubled by personal considerations? If you face off with Feng Yin now, you would be killed by him, and my imperial father would only turn a blind eye to the matter. Thus, bear with it for the moment to exchange for a clear and boundless sky in the future, the third imperial prince advised. From his mouth, Ling Han was made aware of the attitude of the imperial family. No matter how much of a fuss he and Feng Yin created with their personal enmity, the imperial family would not interfere. Just like how when he was attacked by Feng Yin in the middle of the street at midnight, when not a single imperial guard had appeared, and when he had crippled Feng Luo's arms, the imperial family too did not take any action. Even when Feng Luo died by his hand, when he returned, he did not see the imperial family pursue the matter either. Needless to say, as Feng Yin had entered the Winter Moon sect, the imperial family would naturally not dare to take action against him. As for Ling Han, he had the two big bosses of alchemy to back him up now at first, and now he himself had become a big boss like them, so the imperial family similarly dared not make a move against him. Unless Ling Han did something that would weaken the authority of the imperial family. Thus, just battle it out as much as the two of you liked, as it was a personal enmity anyways. However, the backers on both sides could not act. Whether it was Fu Yuanshang killing off Feng Yin, or some elite of the Winter Moon sect killing Ling Han, the imperial family would be unable to give a good explanation to the other side. If the backers on either side made a move, then the imperial family would be forced to interfere. Ling Han smiled. Since he was now aware of the imperial family's bottom line, he could take advantage to turn the battle in his favor. "I am going to attend tomorrow's wedding," he said. "You!" The third imperial prince could not help but become furious. Chapter 253. Chapter 253, The Seventh Imperial Prince. The third imperial prince had thought at first that his earnest and well-meaning advice would have successfully persuaded Ling Han, but never thought that the latter would completely disregard his words. Thus, he could not help but be angry. If it had been anyone else, he would have definitely rebuked him harshly, or even possibly thrown a harsh slap at him. But when he recalled that there were the two big bosses of alchemy standing behind Ling Han, he could only suppress the flames of rage burning in his heart and say, "Ling Han, what capability do you have to oppose Feng Yin? Putting aside the fact that you are not strong enough to oppose him, the Liu clan would only have to send out a spiritual ocean clansman, and that would be enough to prevent you from even stepping in through their doors." Ling Han smiled and said, "I never thought that your Imperial Highness would be so worried about me." The third Imperial Prince of course knew that this was sarcasm, and instantly, his face darkened as he said, "Ling Han, don't lose your senses because of women. Don't forget, we are men who have great goals to aspire to." Ling Han shook his head internally. He realized that the third Imperial Prince must have had no idea that he was already a black-grade, high-level alchemist himself. Otherwise, the former would naturally have much more confidence in him and would definitely not dare to speak to him in such a way. In truth, he did not have any intention to deliberately conceal this matter. Thus, it was actually very easy to find out that he had already gained the status of a black-grade high-level alchemist at least. The Spirit Treasures Pavilion found out very early on, but for the one and only third Imperial Prince, how could his information be so outdated? Then, it must have been someone who had done something, which led to the third Imperial Prince being still ignorant of this matter. In the Imperial City, the only one who had the power to achieve this was the Rain Emperor. Everyone said that the current Rain Emperor was greatly skilled and a master of strategy, and was possibly the ruler who had the broadest vision since the establishment of Rain Country. Then, how could the Rain Emperor be completely unaware when his sons were all moving in secret and forming their own alliances? Even if he was aware, he did not interfere or make any move to stop them. Obviously, the Rain Emperor wanted to see which of his sons was the most brilliant before he would pass on the throne. This could also be considered as a test of skill for the Imperial Princes. Unfortunately, the eldest Imperial Prince and third Imperial Prince were completely unaware of this and thought that their actions were extremely secret, having no idea that the Rain Emperor was aware of everything they did. Ling Han sighed. Most likely, the third Imperial Prince had not passed the test. If he was determined to put all his effort into supporting the third Imperial Prince, then with the power in his hands, no matter how weak the third Imperial Prince was, he could still somehow push him up to the throne. But who asked the third Imperial Prince to cut off this path himself? "Your Imperial Highness, Yutong is my friend, and I am definitely not one to give up on my friends," Ling Han declared. The third Imperial Prince was practically about to explode in fury. He had advised him so patiently and earnestly, but why did Ling Han take no heed of his words? He said angrily, "Don't pretend to be so noble and virtuous. If you want beautiful women, I can give you 1,000 or 10,000. I can even give Ziyin to you." In his heart, even Ziyin was merely a tool he could manipulate. As long as she could help him ascend to the throne, he could discard her at any time. Ling Han shook his head and said, "People who walk different paths cannot make plans together. Please leave, Your Imperial Highness." The third Imperial Prince's face darkened, and he said, "Ling Han, have you forgotten about the Eye of Truth? Anyone who covets the secret treasure of the country would not be given a light punishment." "Is Your Imperial Highness threatening me?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Then you're on your own," the third Imperial Prince humphed and left with a flourish of his robes. What a hot temper. Ling Han could not help but smile. If this guy knew that he was now already a black-grade high-level alchemist, what kind of expression would he have on his face? Would he be so overwhelmed with regret that he wanted to smash his head into a wall? Not too long after, another person arrived. The eldest Imperial Prince. Similar to the third Imperial Prince, he was also trying to persuade Ling Han not to attend the wedding tomorrow. His attitude was much more forceful than the third Imperial Prince, but the final result was the same. His efforts were all in vain, and he even slammed his hand onto the table in fury before leaving in a rage. Ling Han sighed. This was obviously his personal business, but why were they all trying to bend him to their will, and upon his refusal, looked like they were the ones wronged? What kind of logic was that? Is young Master Ling here? At this moment, a knock once again was heard from the front doors. He really had a lot of visitors today. If it was not for the fact that he had sent Hunyo to rest in the Black Tower early on, most likely the little girl would have been awakened by the commotion quite a few times by now, and most probably would have jumped out in fury to bite the people who had disturbed her slumber. Ling Han went over to open the door and saw there was a tall, slender young man standing at the doorway. He was quite handsome, and though his attire was quite casual, he carried on him a certain innate aura, making him seem powerful even though he was completely calm. "I am Qi Changyu. Please do not be angered by my disturbing you at such a late time tonight." This young man looked to be about 20 years old and was at the 9th layer of the element gathering tier. Among the younger generation of the Imperial City, he was not the least bit outstanding. Another with the surname Qi. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "So it was you, Your Imperial Highness, the 7th Imperial Highness." Right, he was really quite popular, wasn't he? Now, all the 3 Imperial Princes who had the right to actually compete for the throne had all paid him a visit. However, he did not know if the 7th Imperial Prince was also here to persuade him to not attend the wedding tomorrow. The 7th Imperial Prince also smiled and said, "Young Master Ling must definitely be going to attend the wedding tomorrow, right? So what Your Imperial Highness means to say is that it is best that I don't go." "No." The 7th Imperial Prince shook his head, a sliver of anger appearing on his face. He said, "This is the land of the rain country. Yet Feng Yin used the Winter Moon sect as a threat in order to forcibly marry one of our women. If I was the emperor, I would definitely have punched him so hard he would fly out of the country. I do not think that the Winter Moon sect would dare to oppose the rain country just because of one little disciple. If they really did, then they would really become a joke to the whole northern region." As someone who had lived 2 lives, Ling Han naturally had sharp eyes. He could tell that although there was a bit of pretense in the 7th Imperial Prince's words, that was really how he felt. However, as an Imperial Prince, his actions and words would always be a bit exaggerated. "And so Your Imperial Highness is here to support me then?" The 7th Imperial Prince nodded and said, "Just do as you wish tomorrow, young Master Ling. I am willing to become your sturdy backer." Ling Han could not help but smile. "Why does Your Imperial Highness have such confidence in me? The Liu clan has a powerful member of the spiritual pedestal tier on standby, and with my limited ability, most likely, I wouldn't even be able to step in through the doors, right?" These words were what the eldest and the 3rd Imperial Princes had used to try to persuade him, but now he was using them to test the 7th Imperial Prince. He did not believe that a man who was capable of competing for the throne was a hot-headed man. Moreover, they had not even met before. So why would the 7th Imperial Prince come to offer his support? The 7th Imperial Prince laughed heartily and said, "A straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. To tell you the truth, I have done my investigation and discovered that young Master Ling is someone who has gained 3 silver plaques. In Rain Country, not even my imperial father would dare do anything too harsh to young Master Ling. At most, he would most possibly have you captured and chase you out of our borders. Indeed, this guy knew that he had become a black-grade high-level alchemist, and that was why he had come so full-heartedly to support him. Ling Han considered for a moment, then asked, "What kind of support are you intending to offer me, Your Imperial Highness?" The 7th Imperial Prince could not help but be delighted. He knew that Ling Han had already accepted him. If not, he would not possibly ask him such a question. He said quickly, "Though I do not have too much power, I am willing to give my support to you and offer you the assistance of 2 elites of Spiritual Ocean Tier." Ling Han was surprised. Spiritual Pedestal Tier was the highest tier of power in Rain Country. Even the Rain Emperor himself was only able to ask for their help and could not command them. Thus, the 7th Imperial Prince being able to command the power of Spiritual Ocean Tier elites was something very impressive. One had to understand that even Ling Han had only just managed to con a Spiritual Ocean Tier elite into becoming his bodyguard. Moreover, this bodyguard had not yet been tested. "Then I shall gratefully accept your Imperial Highness's aid. Thank you," he said, smiling. Chapter 254. Chapter 254, Going to the Lu residence. The 7th Imperial Prince was very tactful. He did not show any signs of arrogance as the supporter, and did not make any requests of Ling Han to do something in return for his assistance. He merely continued to talk with Ling Han about tomorrow, and about how he was going to coordinate with Ling Han's movements. Ling Han was not reserved either. If he was truthfully going to accept someone as a friend, then he would definitely not be reserved in asking his friends for help. The opposite was true as well. If his friend needed his help, he would not refuse either. The 2 of them conversed for a very long time. The 7th Imperial Prince finally begged his leave, and when Ling Han escorted him to the doors, he smiled and said, "I will come find you to share a drink in the future, Your Imperial Highness." "So will I," the 7th Imperial Prince laughed loudly, knowing that Ling Han had finally accepted him. There was no exception among the 3 Imperial Princes. They all wanted to go through Ling Han instead of asking for Feng Yan's help to assist them on their way to the throne. That was because the latter was absolutely an impractical choice. The Rain Emperor would definitely not allow the Winter Moon sect to interfere in the affairs of Rain Country, what more when it was a very important issue like the inheritance of the throne. Whichever Imperial Prince actually dared to make an alliance with Feng Yan would directly fall out of the Rain Emperor's favor. Thus, though neither the eldest nor 3rd Imperial Prince was very optimistic about Ling Han, they had merely come to persuade him not to be rash, and had absolutely no intention of switching to Feng Yan's side. No matter what, Ling Han was still a citizen of Rain Country, and as for Feng Yan, the night passed, and the wedding day of the princess of the Lu clan had arrived. Anyone with the slightest bit of social status in the imperial city turned their eyes to the Lu clan. This day when the Lu clan would be marrying off one of their daughters would definitely not be a fine and sunny day. On the other hand, a great storm could very possibly happen today. Naturally, if Ling Han was willing to be a coward, then nothing would happen, of course. It would only be a day when a deity-like woman would have to marry a piece of trash. "Nyo, are you ready?" Ling Han asked. "Nyo has to look beautiful, wait," Nyo called from inside the room. Ling Han could not help but laugh loudly. When he entered the room to take a look, Nyo was putting on makeup in front of the copper mirror. She had painted her little face red and green and looked like a monster. He walked over, took a towel, and began to wipe the little girl's face. He said, Nyo does not need to make up. You look most beautiful when you're completely clean." Nyo was very pleased and obediently allowed him to wipe off the makeup on her face. Ling Han shook his head. This little girl must have learnt this from Lu Yutong and Li Xichan. Indeed, it was the nature of a woman to want to look beautiful. Even such a little girl had already learnt to show off her looks shamelessly. "Let's go." Ling Han held onto Nyo's little hand and walked out. When he arrived outside the courtyard, Guang Yuan, Zhu Wujiao, Jin Wuji, and Li Hao approached. "I say, brat, Are you really planning to go make a big fuss? Guang Yuan asked, looking very displeased. If you are afraid, you can stay behind, Ling Han said calmly. Pei, how could I be one who goes back on his word? Guang Yuan humphed angrily, pointed his finger at Ling Han, and said, however, if I die at the Lu residence today, I won't spare you even if I become a ghost. From what I see, Big Brother Guang is a very lucky man, and is definitely not one who will have a short life, Ling Han said with a smile. You brat are definitely my unlucky star. Guang Yuan still looked very displeased. Ling Han laughed loudly. Guang Yuan still decided to take the risk with him, and he was very glad for this. He had indeed not thought wrongly of the former. Since he was willing to take such great risk with him, then he would definitely not treat him unfairly. If Guang Yuan really encountered fatal danger, he would use the Black Tower to take him in. He did not care even if this would expose the fact that he had some kind of logic-defying treasure on him. Zhu Wujiu and the others did not say anything. They merely followed closely behind Ling Han. Actions spoke louder than words. The destination was the Lu residence. The 6 of them walked on, and very quickly, they arrived at the Lu residence. The crimson front doors were wide open, and a crimson carpet was laid out on the ground. There was a group of servants at the doorway who were receiving the guests. As it was now close to noon, the guests that should be here had more or less already arrived, and it was a very lively scene at the doorway. There were guests, and there were those who were not qualified to be invited. They were all standing outside, watching the excitement. Ling Han and the others walked over. Zhu Wujiu and the other 4 very naturally fell behind a single step behind Ling Han. The main character today was Ling Han. Young master, please show me your invitation. Immediately, a servant approached them and smiled at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled and asked, what if I don't have an invitation? If you do not have an invitation, then you cannot enter. The servant still maintained his smile. Today was a joyous day for the Lu clan, so if it was preventable, it was best not to make any issue. Moreover, he could not see through the aura exuding from Ling Han at all, which obviously meant that the latter was stronger than him. If they came to blows, he would definitely be on the losing side. As a result, he naturally hoped that he could coax Ling Han to leave peacefully. Ling Han smiled and said, my name is Ling Han. Would it be possible to make an exception for me? Ling Han. The servant got a scare from that. He had naturally heard of Ling Han's name. It could be said that the reason why Lu Yutong was getting married today was greatly related to Ling Han. If it was not for the fact that Ling Han was an enemy of Feng Yan, how could it be possible that Lu Yutong would marry such a character like Feng Ming? So it was young Master Ling, please. The servant made a gesture to allow Ling Han to pass. He was not stopped. Ling Han had initially planned to fight his way in, but had never thought that he would be able to step in through the front doors so easily. Looks like the Lu clan was also indecisive about this marriage, and was not willing to become Feng Yan's weapon. Thus, they simply decided to have the 2 of them to confront each other directly. He strode through the main doors. Some outside had very sharp eyes, and when they saw that Ling Han had entered without needing to display his invitation, they could not help but exclaim at the unfairness of it. However, the servant glared at them and said, that person just now was Ling Han, young Master Ling. Instantly, everyone around was silenced. However, the silence was only momentary, and they began to whisper to one another. Ling Han had indeed come, and there would definitely be a grand show today. Hey brother, just let us go in and watch. That's right, we're not trying to get a free meal. Just having a spot to stand would be fine. At worst, we could pay entrance fees. They all began to call out. The servant glared at them and said, what kind of place do you all think this is? The marketplace or the arena? If any one of you still dare to spout nonsense, then I'll have you all apprehended. The Lu clan was one of the 8 great clans. It was not a small issue even if it was only one of their doormen who was making the threats. This immediately caused them all to shut their mouths, not daring to say anything more. However, they all pricked up their ears. Even if they couldn't go in and see anything, then they'd just have to settle for simply listening. Naturally, the news spread quickly. Moreover, Ling Han was the cause of today's wedding in the first place. He was one of the main characters. The news that he had arrived very quickly spread throughout the whole Lu residence. All of them, including those who had come as guests, looked like they were here to watch a grand show. Ling Han, young Master Han, Mr. Ling. A considerable number approached, whereas the eldest and the third imperial prince stood amongst the crowd wearing slightly dark expressions. They were obviously very displeased with the fact that Ling Han had not heeded their advice and came. Ling Han clasped his hands together and raised them in everyone's direction, which could be considered as having greeted them. Big Brother Ling. A young man approached. He was about 15 or 16 years old and had a slightly shy expression on his face, though there was an endless evil hidden in the depths of his eyes. Yin Tianzhao. Ling Han gave a nod. Yet, he was quickly shocked, because he actually could not see through this young man. Chapter 255. Chapter 255. The wedding begins. Though Ling Han was only in the gushing spring tier, he also had the eyes of someone who used to be in the heaven tier. He would be able to tell with a single glance someone's cultivation level as long as they were below the heaven tier. But he actually couldn't see through Yin Tianzhao now. Had the latter already reached the heaven tier? That was impossible. That was absolutely impossible. Even he, the Alchemy Emperor, had spent 200 years to finally achieve this step, and no one had achieved such an impressive feat before him. Although it was impossible that no one managed to repeat his achievement, but there would definitely not appear a young man in his mid-teens who managed to reach the heaven tier. Ling Han observed him closely and could not help but frown faintly. He could somewhat sense an incomparably evil aura from Yin Tianzhao, but could not clearly describe what it exactly was. But what could be confirmed was that this aura had formed a kind of barrier, which did not let him see through Yin Tianzhao. Ling Han could not help but heave a sigh internally. Though he had met such monsters as the Sword Emperor and the Phoenix Maiden in his last life, at that time, he was already standing at the peak of the world. Thus, he would not feel anything strange about meeting so many exceptional geniuses. But what about this lifetime? There first appeared a Rong Huan Xian, who had gained the inheritance of the Thousand Corpse sect. Originally, he would have been able to reach the level of a monster, but after his body was taken over by a Jura Demon Emperor, he would definitely be even more terrifying in the future. And now here was a Yin Tianzhao, who was capable of preventing Ling Han from seeing through him, which meant that the former's monstrous level was definitely not low. He was only in the gushing spring tier, and was currently in the tiny little rain country, yet he had already encountered two people who could possibly become logic-defying in the future, then in the 9 nations of the desolate north, the whole northern region, or even in this whole world. How many such monsters would there be? Weren't there too many geniuses in this lifetime? He had so easily encountered them. So it's little brother Yin. Ling Han smiled, then looked left and right and asked, "Where's Lady Yin?" "My mother felt a little unwell and is currently resting at home. She has not come," Yin Tianzhao said politely, looking completely like a polite, well-mannered young man, making anyone who saw him unable to help but have a favorable impression of him. Ling Han nodded and said, "Is little brother Yin planning to give me your support?" "Haha, I am just here to attend big sister Yutong's wedding today and enjoy a cup of wine. I don't know about anything else." Yin Tianzhao laughed and stepped to another side. He easily maneuvered, and his behavior was absolutely unlike a young man of his age. This was seen by some old guys, and they could not help but be astonished. When had such a young man appeared in the imperial city? Not only was he very mature, but even they were not able to see through to his cultivation level, which was something extremely strange. Ling Han. A harsh voice was heard, and they saw a tall man approach them. He said, "What are you doing here?" "Lu Bucheng, Lu Yutong's 7th uncle." Ling Han was pondering over his attitude as he asked, "It is Yutong's wedding. Should I not come here to offer my congratulations?" Lu Bucheng looked meaningfully at Ling Han and was similarly pondering over Ling Han's words. He frowned slightly and said, "If you have come to enjoy a cup of wine, then we would naturally welcome you. But if you are here to make a fuss, then the Lu residence is not a place where you can do as you like." Ling Han smiled and nodded. He could not tell the attitude of the Lu clan from Lu Buqing's words and tone. He was simply discussing the matter as it was. Let's just see, then. About all the guests had arrived, and they all took their seats. The majority of the seating was arranged in advance, but there were some exceptions such as Ling Han. However, they naturally had some emergency seats set aside, so he at least did not have to stand at one side. Fu Yuansheng, Grandmaster Fu, has arrived. A servant announced, which instantly caused a shock to all those seated. That was one of the two big bosses of Alchemy of Rain Country, who was merely beneath the Rain Emperor in status. The clan head of the Lu clan personally came out to receive Fu Yuansheng. The two of them walked side by side, smiling and laughing, and seemed to be having an enjoyable conversation. The Lu clan marrying one of their daughters actually managed to successfully invite Fu Yuansheng. What an honor was that! But those seated were well aware that Fu Yuansheng could not possibly have come for the sake of the Lu clan. Instead, he was here because of Ling Han. They had long heard that the two big bosses of alchemy were dearly fond of Ling Han, and Fu Yuansheng was personally here to attend the wedding today. He was obviously here to support Ling Han fully. How could this be mere fondness? This was practically pampering Ling Han like he was his own son. The third elder, Jia Bo Yuan, of Spirit Treasures Pavilion, Master Jia has arrived. Fu Yuansheng had just taken his seat when another very important person had arrived. Jia Bo Yuan's status was not as high as Fu Yuansheng's, but he was still someone who was in the spiritual pedestal tier, and in Rain Country, that was an elite level. Usually, it would be difficult even to catch one glimpse of such elites, but they actually came to attend the wedding today. Lu Yutong and Feng Ming did not have such face. Then Jia Bo Yuan either came here because of Ling Han or because of Feng Yin. It was unknown whose side he was on. Right at this moment, Feng Yin finally arrived. He had his hands placed behind his back and casually sat at the most central seat. When his eyes passed over Ling Han, a cold smirk appeared at the corners of his lips and his eyes were filled with killing intent. The unspoken words here were, "I want you to watch as your own woman is married to another man. But what can you do?" Ling Han pretended he had not seen anything. It was not the time yet. There was no need to rush. "The groom and the bride pay their respects to the heavens and earth," the announcer called out loudly, and they could see a person walking out from either side of the main hall. On the left side was a young man who was wearing nuptial robes. He was quite good-looking, but filled with a sloppy, ruffian-like air. On the right side was a young woman in bridal robes. She was wearing a red veil on her head and was being supported by a maid-servant on one side. She was slowly walking over. Anyone who had eyes could see that the woman in bridal robes had her cultivation sealed and was being forcefully dragged over by the maid-servant beside her. "Wait." Ling Han stood up. "Here it is, here it is, here comes the grand show," everyone thought in their hearts, and they were all filled with anticipation after all. What was so nice about attending a wedding anyways? They were not the groom, and the majority of the people here had come here for the confrontation between Ling Han and Feng Yin. "What do you mean, Ling Han?" one of the clansmen of the Lu clan asked frostily. "I do not agree to this wedding," Ling Han said with a shake of his head. "Haha, who do you think you are? Does the Lu clan marrying off one of their daughters still require your approval?" the man said icily. He was in his 30s, and was at the 7th layer of the gushing spring tier. Ling Han looked at Lu Bucheng, but saw that the latter was completely unperturbed, as if he had no idea what was going on. Instantly, Ling Han understood. There were actually two voices in the Lu clan. One was in support of marrying Lu Yutong off to Feng Ming, while the other was not in agreement. However, the side that was in disagreement was obviously at a disadvantage. Thus, Lu Yutong had still come out to get married, but with the understanding that this would not affect the benefit of the entire Lu clan, this side was still willing to open the back door for Ling Han. Therefore, Ling Han had successfully entered into the Lu residence. Otherwise, he would definitely have had to fight his way in. Ling Han strode over and said, "Let me repeat, I do not agree to this wedding." "Get lost!" the clansmen of the Lu clan shouted, and flew over, delivering a punch towards Ling Han. The fist approached, and there was a terrifying shock wave surrounding it. As a clansman of the Liu clan, his battle prowess was more powerful than any other person in the 7th layer of the Gushing Spring tier, and had already reached the level of an ordinary person in the 8th layer of the Gushing Spring tier. Ling Han raised his hand and casually threw a punch of his own. Chapter 256. Chapter 256, Entering the Stage. Pong. When Ling Han's fist flew past, there was no visible use of any kind of incredible martial arts technique, yet he just so happened to capture a tiny opening in his opponent's attack. In front of all of their eyes, Ling Han's fist very easily slammed into the chest of that Liu clansman, and the latter flew back from the impact. This punch was very solid, and that man let out a muffled humph before directly passing out from the blow. A wave of surprised exclamations rose up all around. One had to understand, that member of the Liu clan was in the 7th layer of the Gushing Spring tier, whereas Ling Han was only in the 1st layer of that tier. An opponent in the late stage of the Gushing Spring tier should have absolute domination over one in the early stage, so how could he possibly not even be able to withstand a single punch from Ling Han? The expressions of the eldest and the 3rd imperial princes changed drastically as well. Ling Han was actually so powerful, so much that he could defeat even an opponent in the 7th layer of the Gushing Spring tier in a single strike. This was not very much weaker when compared to Feng Yin. Not too long ago, Ling Han's cultivation level was not strong enough to even be considered by them. They had decided to lower themselves to befriend Ling Han simply because they had seen the value of Ling Han's background, but Ling Han's personal ability was not even worth their consideration. But now, this was completely unbelievable. Meanwhile, the 7th imperial prince smiled. The stronger Ling Han was, the happier he was, because he had helped Ling Han in his time of need, and this friendship was absolutely genuine. Some clansmen of the Liu clan looked glad, while there were some who looked angered. Obviously, this was because they were in two minds about this situation, and hence this gave rise to their completely different attitudes. Ling Han continued to advance, as if he had just struck a minor character that was not worth a second mention. Ling Han, you are definitely bold to dare to come to the Liu clan and commit a crime. Another middle-aged man jumped out. It was already difficult to find one that could stop Ling Han among the younger generation. This man was about 40 years old and was in the 9th layer of the Gushing Spring tier. He had been stuck on this cultivation level for a considerable number of years, but it was also because of this that he had solidified and refined his power at this cultivation level. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "I'm just ordinarily brave. I'm simply here to see a friend." "Since that's the case, then please conduct yourself with dignity," the Liu clansman said. His name was Liu Zhang, and he was very likely to break through to the spiritual ocean tier. As a result, he was qualified enough to come into contact with the core secrets of the Liu clan. He knew that there were two voices in the Liu clan. One was supporting Ling Han, while the other was supporting Feng Yin. He naturally was in support of Feng Yin, because Feng Yin had promised many benefits that moved the Liu clan to agree. However, because there were still many clansmen in the Liu clan who were in support of Ling Han, he did not want to become enemies with Ling Han. Ling Han said, "If Yutong is willingly getting married, I will definitely deliver a valuable gift to congratulate her on her marriage. However, if there's someone forcing her to go through with it, then, as a friend, I will definitely not agree to the matter." "Don't you think you are being too much of a busybody?" Liu Zhang humphed. "Due to the fact that you are acting to help a friend, if you step back now, I will spare you for your insolence. Let Yutong speak. I want to personally hear what she has to say." Ling Han continued to advance. Insolence. Liu Zhang was angered now. He was not only a clansman of the Liu clan, but was also one who was about to step into the central circle of the Liu clan. Who would dare not heed any words he spoke? However, even though he had spoken such kind words to Ling Han, the latter still insisted on being a pest. All around them, the spectators were watching. At this moment, naturally no one would run out and play the role of fool. Ling Han strode forwards and passed by Liu Zhang, paying absolutely no attention to the latter at all. "How dare you?" Liu Zhang could not take this kind of humiliation. He suddenly turned around and stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han's shoulder. Pa! Ling Han did not even turn his head. He simply grabbed onto Lu Zheng's wrist with one hand, and with a toss, shua, Lu Zheng was tossed away. Coincidentally, it just so happened that he landed by Feng Yan's feet. So awesome, not even Lu Zheng was able to stand up to him. How many battle stars did this guy have? But he was obviously merely in the first layer of the gushing spring tier. So how was he so awesome? Among the crowd, Yin Tian Zhao smiled, but a green light flashed in the depths of his eyes. It transformed into a strange-looking six-pointed star, staring at Ling Han fixatedly as the smile at the corners of his lips increasingly widened. Feng Yin looked down to look at Lu Zheng, who had fallen in front of him before once again raising his head. His face was extremely calm, and there was no visible change in expression. Ling Han, you have gone too far. An old man who looked to be in his 50s walked out, wearing an expression of displeasure. Lu Ci, spiritual ocean tier. Don't be mistaken just because his name had a CI1. This man was not the slightest bit merciful. He had always had the reputation of being a ruthless man. Now, Ling Han was invincible among all those in the gushing spring tier, so no matter how many gushing spring tier martial artists faced him, they were simply asking to be humiliated. As a result, this spiritual ocean tier elite of the Lu clan could only shamelessly step out, even if it was a bit embarrassing to bully the weak when he was so much stronger, but it was at least better than not being able to restrain Ling Han and allowing him to make a fuss in such a public setting. Big Brother Guang, I'll hand this piece of trash over to you, Ling Han said with a smile. Guang Yuan stood up, very displeased, and said, this is a spiritual ocean tier martial artist, not a piece of trash. Pei, I am indeed very unlucky that I would actually be conned by you. Though he said such words, he had already jumped out and appeared in front of Lu Ci. Guang Yuan. Lu Ci naturally recognized this Guang Yuan. Spiritual ocean tier martial artists were the true LTs in Rain Country. For example, in such a big place like Diyuan City, there was only one person in the spiritual ocean tier, which was proof enough of the rarity of such elites. What more when Guang Yuan was also one of the top 10 among loose cultivators. Not even a great clan like the Lu clan would underestimate him. Guang Yuan laughed and said, Brother Lu, you don't move, and I won't move either. All right? Lu Ci's face changed drastically. These words seemed to be giving him face, but one had to understand that this was the Lu clan, and today was the day the Lu clan was marrying off one of their daughters. What kind of logic was that you all came to create trouble, and he was still not allowed to act? Brother Guang Yuan, could you give me some face and not interfere? Another elite of the Lu clan stepped out, smiling at Guang Yuan. Lu Chuang. Guang Yuan's face could not help but tense up. This man was the kind of man who could wear a big smile while having evil intentions. He could call you brother and converse enjoyably with you, yet immediately become hostile and attack in the next moment. Moreover, he was in the 6th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, which was a layer higher than Guang Yuan's own cultivation level. Hee, I'll come in and join the fun too. A thin old man stood up. His head was bald and had very small eyes, but his eyes shone with a frighteningly cold light. Not even a blade of grass grows, Lu Zhongtian. This time, it was Lu Chuang's turn to become tense. Lu Zhongtian was a loose cultivator as well, and he was one generation older than Guang Yuan. The nickname of not even a blade of grass grows described his bald head, and also came to be because he was a ruthless man who did not leave his enemies alive. There had been no news of this man since 5 years ago, and most people thought that he was already long dead. However, the Lu clan knew that Lu Zhongtian had been taken in by the imperial family. This man appeared here now, and was obviously on Ling Han's side. Would this be the imperial family's gesture to make known their attitude? Even the eldest and the 3rd imperial princes were shocked. They were naturally aware of Lu Zhongtian's identity. This was one of the top elites of the imperial family. They too have 2 such men under their respective banners, and Lu Zhongtian was the 7th imperial prince's man. Have 7th younger brother and Ling Han joined forces? However, no matter how they looked at it, there was no way for Ling Han to get the upper hand in the battle today. How could 7th younger brother have made such a mistake? He obviously knew that Ling Han was definitely going to lose, yet still insisted on supporting him? One had to understand. Feng Yin had the Winter Moon sect behind him, and what party of Rain Country was capable of opposing such a colossal behemoth? How weird. Seventh younger brother should not be as idiotic as that. Chapter 257. Chapter 257. Open Confrontation. There were members of the other 7 great clans who had come to attend the wedding. Although those who were in the spiritual pedestal tier, due to their high status, had definitely not personally arrived, there was still a considerable number of martial artists of the spiritual ocean tier, who were naturally qualified to know Lu Zhongtian's identity, present. The imperial family was interfering? Interesting. Hee, Brother Zhongtian and I are old partners. Since Brother Zhongtian wants to interfere, how could I simply sit by and watch? Another old man stood up smilingly. Xie Chong, is that really Senior Xie? Hiss, Senior Xie is a genius of saber arts, and has been called Overlord Saber years ago. He was in the Hu Yang Academy at the same time as the Rain Emperor, and His Imperial Majesty, the Rain Emperor, has called him the strongest saber wielder that has appeared in these 200 years. He is the chief of the palace guards, and has been on guard in the Imperial Palace all this time. I never thought that he would be here. The spectators all exclaimed in shock. In terms of status, Xie Chong was much higher than Lu Zhongtian. Not only did the former have a higher cultivation level and a higher battle prowess, he was also the chief of the palace guards, and thus could to a great extent represent the imperial family. The eldest and the 3rd imperial princes tensed up. Lu Zhongtian's appearance could only represent the 7th imperial prince's individual support of Ling Han, but it was different in the case of Xie Chong. The Rain Emperor thought highly of Xie Chong, and as the chief of the palace guards, he was only loyal to the Rain Emperor. But now Xie Chong was standing on Ling Han's side. Wouldn't that mean that the Rain Emperor himself was supporting Ling Han? When they recalled the fact that they chose to stand by and do nothing, whereas the 7th Imperial Prince chose to support Ling Han, and now it seemed as if the Rain Emperor too had made his choice, how could this not shock them to pallor? Lu Chuang and Lu Xi's expressions changed drastically. Xie Chong could be considered as a representative of the Rain Emperor. In fact, most of the time, it was Xie Chong who was tasked with going to the various great clans to inform them of the Rain Emperor's decrees, and the extent to which he was exposed was even higher than the Rain Emperor. His appearance definitely did not just represent himself alone. Though Ling Han did not recognize Xie Chong, after hearing the discussions of the people around him, he was made aware of the latter's identity and could not help but nod internally. This was the Rain Emperor's move to express his displeasure towards the Winter Moon sect. It was also a warning. Of course, Rain Country was not qualified to oppose the Winter Moon sect. However, Feng Yin was only a mere disciple, and his behavior was much too arrogant, and had thus attracted the Rain Emperor's displeasure. Xie Chang's appearance was also a knock on the heads of the clansmen of the Lu clan, reminding them not to forget themselves. The enmity between Feng Yin and Ling Han was only limited to the two of them, and it was best that others did not go and join in on the excitement. There was no way that the Lu clan could fail to decipher the Rain Emperor's hidden message. As a result, Lu Xi and Lu Chuang exchanged a look and stepped back respectively. Meanwhile, those clansmen who had intended to step in retook their seats as well. Xie Chong, Lu Zhongtian, and Guang Yuan exchanged smiles, and they too returned to their original positions. This was indeed a great turnabout of events. Previously, Feng Yin and Ling Han had created such a great commotion, and yet there was no sign of movement from the imperial family at all. At first, everyone had thought that it would be the same this time, but did not once think that the Rain Emperor would make a move so unexpectedly. This was something that no one had foreseen at all. The reason the imperial family did not make any move before this was because it had only been a private enmity between Ling Han and Feng Yin. But now that the Lu clan is also implicated in the matter, the significance is completely different. How could the Rain Emperor allow outsiders to interfere in the internal matters of the nation and shake the foundation of the country? A man with sharp insight had seen through the present situation. The others nodded in agreement. The Lu clan was one of the 8 great clans, and one of the pillars of support for the empire. Yet now, they actually publicly sided with Feng Yin and the Winter Moon sect. Did you still care about the imperial family? Or were you planning a rebellion? This did not mean that the Rain Emperor was taking Ling Han's side, though. Rather, it was because Feng Yin, or better said, the Liu clan had exceeded their boundaries and crossed the Rain Emperor's bottom line. There had been two voices in the Liu clan in the first place, and now that the Rain Emperor had also expressed his opinion on the matter, naturally, no one dared to interfere further. It would depend on Feng Yin alone whether he could stop Ling Han or not. Ultimately, this was a private enmity between Ling Han and Feng Yin after all. After taking a few more steps, Ling Han had arrived right in front of the nuptial couple. Ling Han, if you're here to drink at my wedding, I will welcome you. However, if it's anything else, I have no intention to listen. Feng Ming spoke. He looked like an obvious hooligan, but the words he said were very high standard, causing the onlookers to be taken aback. Obviously, these words were taught by Feng Yin, but his following words caused the spectators to frown. Ling Han, I heard that you have a close relation with Yu Tong. You wouldn't be planning to cuckold me, would you? Pooh. Quite a number of people choked. How could he simply ask such a question face to face? Didn't he think it was humiliating to ask such a thing? Idiot. This guy was indeed an idiot. He was an instrument that Feng Yin had made use of to deliberately embarrass Ling Han with. Anyone would probably turn green with fury after hearing his woman being insulted in such a way, right? Even the expressions of the clansmen of the Liu clan turned ugly at this. Liu Yutong was the elite genius daughter of the Liu clan. How could they not feel humiliated after hearing her being insulted so horribly? Let us quickly kneel and wed. Such a beautiful woman. I don't want to wait any longer to consummate our marriage. Feng Ming said lecherously. He had only seen Liu Yutong once, and was captivated under her spell ever since. Even in his dreams, he had never dared to dream that he would one day marry such a magnificent beauty. The guests all shook their heads repeatedly. They did not know what benefits the Liu clan had gained from this wedding, but after these words from Feng Ming, the reputation and pride of the Liu clan was probably ruined completely. Indeed, all the clansmen of the Liu clan looked ashen. They had never thought that Feng Ming would actually be this vulgar. Only Feng Yin was still wearing a smile. He did not look for anyone else except Feng Ming. Wasn't that precisely because of Feng Ming's vulgarity and immorality? The more lowly Feng Ming behaved, the greater the insult would be to Ling Hansi. You are only at this level, to fight over a woman with such a lowly, minor character. What are we standing around for? Let's kneel. Kneel. Can't you see that I have restrained myself for a very long time? Feng Ming urged. Pa. Ling Han moved, and a fist slammed onto Feng Ming's head. The cracking of bones was heard, and Feng Ming's entire head was completely smacked into his chest. His body staggered for a few times and fell onto the ground with a bang. It was only now that blood came trickling out. Fine. The wedding has turned into a funeral. When they saw such a scene, quite a number of people wanted to clap and cheer. It was because Feng Ming was really too lowly and had dragged down their status to his level. Now that he was killed with one strike from Ling Han, they suddenly felt the happy feeling one would feel after finally killing an irritating fly. Only the expressions of the Liu clan clansmen were ugly. No matter what, Feng Ming was a son-in-law of the Liu clan, and now he was actually killed by an outsider like Ling Han. Wasn't that practically a smack to their faces? Ling Han, you are getting bolder and bolder. Feng Yin finally stood, his hands placed behind his back, and walked towards Ling Han. Feng Ming was dead, and he naturally did not care one bit about it. He had never cared about this cousin of his, and the Feng clan did not need such a piece of trash in any case. He had only used Feng Ming to humiliate Ling Han, but had never thought that Ling Han would be so decisive and directly kill Feng Ming with a blow. So what? Ling Han countered. There was already no possibility of reconciliation between him and Feng Yin. Hee. Feng Yin did not become angered. Instead, he said to the clansmen of the Liu clan, "Why did you all stop? Didn't you hear the groom say just now, quickly kneel and complete the wedding ceremony?" Wasn't Feng Ming already struck dead? How was he going to continue the wedding then? Feng Yin couldn't be thinking of having Liu Yutong marry a dead man, right? Evil. That was too evil. No wonder Feng Yin was so calm. His purpose was only to humiliate Ling Han, and it was not much better getting married to a dead man than getting married to a piece of trash. Chapter 258. Chapter 258. Decree of a Spiritual Infant Tier Elite. Feng Ming is already dead, so the matter of this wedding should be dropped, one of the higher-ranking clansmen of the Liu clan declared. He was one of the objectors and had previously endured for a long time. It was only now that he finally chose to speak up. If the Liu clan really married Liu Yutong to a dead man, then how would they be able to continue existing in the imperial city? Feng Yin smiled calmly and said, "So what if he's dead? When I return, I will find a man from the Feng clan, and if Miss Liu thinks one is not enough, I would not mind finding a few more." Once these words were spoken, the clansmen of the Liu clan all looked furious. What did you think the women of the Liu clan were? Prostitutes? And you said you want to find any man, and if one was not enough, you wanted to find a few more? Feng Yin was completely uncaring. So what if he had excited the fury of the crowds? Even if a flock of lambs decided to unite, how could they stand against a fierce lion? He had in his hands absolute power, enough that he would not need to bow his head even in front of the Rain Emperor. What more when it was only a mere Liu clan? "Hung, the wedding is cancelled, get lost," the clan head of the Liu clan declared. The aura of a spiritual pedestal tier elite rolled out like the waves of a stormy sea, causing all those around them to turn pale. The fury of an elite was enough to turn the sky and earth upside down, yet Feng Yin paid no attention. He merely waved his right hand, and in his hand appeared a roll of silken paper. No one saw where he had drawn it out from. He continued to say, "This was the decree that my master had gifted to me. Who would dare disobey?" Everyone's expressions changed instantly. After Feng Yin had deliberately let the news spread out, those in the upper social circle were all aware that Feng Yin had joined the ranks of the disciples of a grand elder of the Winter Moon sect. That was an ultimate elite in the spiritual infant tier. In Rain Country, the flower-blossoming tier was synonymous for invincibility. What more when it was a spiritual infant tier that was practically a living god? With a decree from an elite in the spiritual infant tier in his possession, Feng Yin could completely wave a chicken feather as a token of authority. Even the current Rain Emperor would have to give some face, right? The clan head of the Liu clan instantly choked. He was a forceful person by nature, but in front of the decree of a spiritual infant tier elite, how could he continue with his forceful ways? Feng Yan's eyes swept over the crowd, and no one dared to look him in the eye. They all lowered their heads. He could not help but look arrogant. He was a tyrant, but so what? He had the right to be. Today, he would completely humiliate Ling Han, before killing the latter with his own hands. Just because you say it is the decree of a spiritual infant tier elite, it is one? Ling Han shook his head and said, "I have the token of a shattering void tier elite here myself. Would you like to take a look as well?" "Haha, you're just being stubborn." Feng Yin laughed loudly, but when he saw some people begin to look a bit doubtful, he said, "Fine then. I'll just let you all take a look at the decree of a spiritual infant tier elite." He slowly unrolled the scroll. It was made out of some kind of unknown material. It had the softness of silk, but there were golden threads sewn into it as well, and by itself, it was already a very valuable item. Wong, a terrifying aura spread out from the decree. It was as if an ultimate elite warrior was about to step out from within, and this caused everyone to shiver, as they felt their limbs freeze, and it was as if their hearts would jump out of their chests at any second. This was definitely the decree of a spiritual infant tier elite. Merely the martial intent injected into it spreading out was enough to dominate over an area, and no one could gather the slightest intent to resist. Pa, pa, pa. One by one, they all knelt. The first were those in the body-refining tier, followed by the element-gathering tier ones, and then those in the gushing spring tier. As the decree was increasingly unrolled, even the spiritual ocean tier elites were no longer able to withstand it. However, the spiritual ocean tier was spiritual ocean tier after all. They forced themselves to merely sit on the ground, and were spared from being too embarrassing. Now, there were only a bare few elites of the spiritual pedestal tier who could force themselves to resist. Aside from them, Ling Han and Feng Yin were still standing as well. Meanwhile, Hunyo was still seated and chowing down on her food. She had listened to Ling Han and obediently did not run around anywhere. Aside from them, there was one other person who was still sitting fine. Yin Tian Zhao. The reason why Feng Yin could remain standing was because he was holding the scroll, and was thus protected by the scroll itself. As for Ling Han, he had been an ultimate elite of the heaven tier before, and would naturally have no fear for such dominating might. On the other hand, Hunyo was too inconceivable. But when one recalled that shocking spirit base in her dantian that had almost destroyed even Ling Han's consciousness, it was reasonable to think that she would also be able to resist the might at the level of the spiritual infant tier. But what about Yin Tian Zhao, then? What did he possess that allowed him to resist the martial intent of a powerful elite of the spiritual infant tier? This guy glanced at Ling Han, and a cold smirk curled up the corners of his lips. He turned to look at Hunyo, and could not help but frown and look a bit baffled. Obviously, he could not comprehend Hunyo's calm display. The decree in Feng Yan's hands was fully unrolled, and though those in the spiritual pedestal tier could still resist, they had lost all ability of movement and could only force themselves to resist through gritted teeth. When he cast his eyes around, it seemed as if everyone was bowing down to Feng Yin, making him stand out like a swan in a flock of chickens as an invincible ruler. This kind of decree could not last for a very long time. The martial intent within would very quickly disperse, and to sustain such a powerful martial intent, the material used to construct the decree itself was also incomparably valuable. It could only be used once and would thereafter be completely written off. Thus, this was definitely a very wasteful move. Judging from the fact that Feng Yin was able to obtain such a decree, it was proof enough how very much that Grand Elder of the Winter Moon sect doted on him. He should have obtained this when he had returned to the Winter Moon sect to ask for a spiritual pill to heal Feng Luo's arms. Otherwise, he would have had the ability to completely eliminate Ling Han previously, and would have had no need to drag things on until this moment. Feng Yin laughed loudly, behaving extremely arrogantly. So what if they were in the spiritual pedestal tier? Even they would only be able to quiver like rats in front of him. So what if they were imperial princes or young masters? They could only kneel in front of him. How could this be? However, when Feng Yan swept over Ling Han, he instantly looked astonished. How could this guy still remain standing and look so completely at ease? There was absolutely no logic in that. How are you still standing? Feng Yin could not help but ask. This was the decree of a spiritual infant tier elite he was holding here. None of your business. Ling Han gave him the middle finger. Feng Yin humphed and said, I have underestimated you a bit, to think that you have actually concealed your true abilities thus far. However, you are definitely going to die today, and no one will be able to save you. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Your bragging is too exaggerated. Come on then, and let's see if your neck is really that hard. Insolence. Feng Yin was furious. The reason why he had drawn out the decree was to force Ling Han to his nishi, would step on the latter's head, and let him watch as the wedding proceeded before stamping his head to pulp. Yet now, Ling Han was actually able to resist the dominating might of the decree. Die. He had lost all patience. The level of Ling Han's monstrous ability gave rise to a sense of dread within him. Ling Han was already at the same level as he in terms of the cultivation tier, and he also had a powerful backer. Now, he could stand up against even a decree of a spiritual infant tier elite. It would be best for him to get rid of such an enemy as soon as possible. With a single leap, Feng Yin reached Ling Han. His right hand was open and pressed down towards Ling Han, as heavy as if his hand itself was a mountain. Ling Han raised a fist to parry. Hong. The two attacks crashed together, and visibly, the origin power from their two attacks shattered as if it was glass. Shio, shio, shio. It rebounded in all directions. At the moment, everyone was being suppressed by the decree of the spiritual infant tier elite, and thus unable to defend themselves one bit. When one was scraped by a fragment of origin power, they would instantly be slashed. The two young men exchanged positions, and both looked serious. Their opponent was quite powerful. Feng Yin withdrew the decree, and with a shake of his right hand, a long saber appeared in his hand. Spatial ring. This guy was really quite arrogant. After obtaining such a treasure, he actually dared to show such a precious item in public. Was he not afraid that he would attract the envy of others? Ling Han drew his sword. However, it was not the demon birth sword. How could he so easily show off a level 10 spiritual tool? Chapter 259. Chapter 259. Unbroken Sword Intent. Thankfully, Feng Yan's saber was merely a mortal item. Otherwise, even if it was merely a level 1 spiritual tool, there would be no need for the engraving of any kind of martial intent, as the degree of sharpness alone would be enough to break Ling Han's sword in half. Great Sun Mad Saber, break into pieces and exterminate. Feng Yin gave a loud shout, advancing with saber in hand. The saber flashed, creating ripples of power. The power behind these ripples was extremely terrifying. What a powerful saber intent! Xiechang exclaimed in astonishment. By now, the decree of the spiritual infant tier elite had already been withdrawn, so everyone had naturally gotten back onto their feet and all turned to watch this battle between two young geniuses. However, there were some who had turned to look at Hu Niu and Yin Tianzhao. This was because these two had actually managed to resist the might of a spiritual infant tier elite that had spread out from the decree, which was something that was both shocking and unanticipated. Xiechang was named as Overlord Saber, which clearly showed that his ability in the field of saber arts was definitely in the upper ranks in Rain Country. And even he would exclaim in astonishment, showing that Feng Yan's saber technique was indeed extraordinary. Quite a lot nodded their heads in agreement. Whether they liked Feng Yan was a different matter, but if they were merely looking at his merits, Feng Yan's ability in saber arts was indeed extraordinary. Otherwise, he would not have easily defeated the third imperial prince, Zhao Huan, and Can Yi. Ling Han was also slightly surprised. The might behind this saber technique had reached the level of a black-grade high-level martial arts technique. The Feng clan was of course unable to possess a black-grade martial arts technique. In the whole Rain Country, only the imperial family possessed a black-grade high-level martial arts technique, and it was naturally impossible for Feng Yin to obtain such a secret technique from the imperial family. Thus, he must have been taught when he had gone to the Winter Moon sect. Not bad, not bad. No wonder he had obtained the favor of an elite of spiritual infant tier. Feng Yin should only have practiced this saber art for more than a month, yet he was already quite well practiced with this saber technique. He had at least grasped about 20 to 30% of the true essence of this technique, which showed how uncommon his talent in martial arts was. However, it was only uncommon. With a whistle, Ling Han waved his sword, and the Four Seasons sword technique circulated, heading towards Feng Yin. This sword technique was something he had taught to Liu Yutong. It was also a martial arts technique he had used in his last life. There was no need for him to familiarize himself with it at all. With a thought, he naturally could circulate it smoothly and create a hazy drizzle as if it was a spring shower. These little droplets of rain were formed from Ling Han's origin power. As long as they were attached to one's body, the origin power would enter inside and create a very terrifying level of destruction. What a great sword technique! When they saw Ling Han's sword technique, quite a number of people exclaimed in praise. In the field of martial arts, the saber and the sword were the two most commonly used weapons. Feng Yan's saber technique had drawn exclamations of shock from the saber wielders, whereas Ling Han's sword technique had obtained the praise from the swordsmen. This young man's sword intent is definitely not weaker than Feng Yan's. That's right. Honestly, if I suppress my cultivation level to the level of the gushing spring tier, even I may not be able to use such a powerful sword technique. That's odd. Why do I feel as if this strike is not fully expressed, and there is some reservation? You have that feeling too? With a long whistle, Feng Yin had advanced with his saber in hand. Ting! A crisp sound was heard, creating a sound wave that spread out in all directions. Those martial artists below the gushing spring tier began to bleed from their ears, noses, and eyes, and looked very terrible. There was also a large number of people who were in the gushing spring tier that could not help but cover their ears. Ling Han and Feng Yin were both forced back, and this exchange of blows gave them both an equal share of the limelight. It was difficult to decide who was stronger. I have underestimated you a bit. Feng Yin humphed icily. With a wave of his long saber, he created a bitingly cold light that raged like a waterfall. The saber rolls 30,000 feet and slashes all enemies on this world. Xie Cheng's hand trembled, and he could not help but touch the hilt of his own saber, fighting spirit flickering in his eyes. Such a saber intent really gave him an itch, making him have the urge to battle such a powerful saber intent. That strike just now was actually not his full power. Gods, he's already so powerful, and he can actually still increase his power. He's really too terrifying. This time, Ling Han would only be able to retreat in the face of his superior strength. In the midst of the exclamations of surprise from their audience, Ling Han waved his sword and once more the spring rain appeared. However, it was only for an instant before the sword intent changed abruptly. From the gentle spring rain, it transformed into the shocking thunder of summer. Hong long long. The sound of thunder was endless, almost deafening their ears. What? Everyone was flabbergasted. A series of sword techniques? How could this be? The first strike has not been fully displayed, yet he was able to make another strike? Additionally, the switching of his sword intent is so natural that it gives one the feeling of spring moving into summer, which abides by the rules of nature. No wonder I felt that the strike just now was not fully expressed. So it seems as if the sword intent is unbroken and has not been fully expended at all. This is really too scary. How did this guy cultivate such a technique? But was that the end of it? Ling Han's sword intent once again changed. An autumn breeze began to blow. It was a bit chilly and filled with killing intent. It changed once again and became the biting cold of winter. Endless white snow flew all around, and they could not help but hug themselves, feeling cold. One sword technique has 4 sword intents. Gods, what a monster! This is too much of a monster. How is this possible? Everyone was dumbfounded. This had completely exceeded their level of understanding. Such a sword technique should not have appeared on this mortal plane at all. Ling Han smiled calmly. When he combined the 4-season sword technique into one, its might was close to the level of an Earth-grade martial arts technique. If it was not for the fact that he had a sliver of the divine sense of a heaven-tier elite, he would not have been able to so smoothly use such a sword technique. And once there was a lapse, there would be a break in the 4 seasons, and the power behind the combined sword technique would be even lower than simply using one single sword technique. Spring rain, summer thunder, autumn wind, and winter snow. Ling Han controlled these 4 sword intents and boldly advanced towards Feng Yin in attack. Feng Yin's expression could not help but change drastically. If Ling Han had only used a single-season sword technique, he would be completely unafraid, and could even use the forcefulness of his saber to suppress Ling Han. But now that the 4-season sword technique was combined into one, it produced the effect of 1 + 1 was larger than 2. This was a sword array. It was equivalent to having 4 martial artists join forces against him. No matter how powerful he was, how could he be able to stand against 4 Ling Han at the same time? He roared furiously, and his saber lowered and stabbed into the ground. His right foot suddenly stamped onto the ground, and he forced his body to fly back in retreat. Hong! The images of the sword surged, yet they missed their target. Only the tables and chairs nearby were carved into pieces that flew into the air. Who? Feng Yin kept panting harshly. Just now, he had forcibly withdrawn his attack, which was equivalent to attacking himself. Thus, he was now feeling horrible. He hurriedly swallowed a medicinal pill, his eyes fixated on Ling Han and a powerful dread flashing in them. He could tell that one strike from Ling Han contained 4 sword techniques and 4 different sword intents. If it was only one, he was not afraid, but when the 4 seasons joined forces, the might was too powerful. Even he did not dare to face such an attack head-on. Damn! At first, He could easily crush Ling Han with a single lift of his hand. However, he had not yet obtained the approval of the Winter Moon sect at the time, so he had been cautious and planned to kill Ling Han 3 months later instead of doing so immediately. He had never thought that his mistake would have caused his younger brother to die by Ling Han's hand, and the latter had furthermore even obtained the ability to stand against him as an equal. This brat had really developed too fast, hadn't he? Get rid of him. He definitely had to get rid of him. Feng Yin once again drew out the decree and unrolled it. The powerful suppression was again released, and pa, everyone was compelled to kneel or sit on the ground, all forced into a lower position. Die! Feng Yin used the decree like it was a whip and whipped it towards Ling Han. There were characters flashing on its surface, and it was for some reason eerie. Chapter 260. Chapter 260, Compel. Ling Han did not fear the dominating might of a spiritual infant-tier elite, but if he was struck by the martial intent of one, that would be like an egg being smashed onto a rock. His only fate would be being shattered into pieces. Thus, when the decree flew towards him, he could only choose to retreat. Run, run. Let's see where you can run to. Feng Yin smirked frostily and chased after him, waving the decree like a whip. When he whipped the decree, the might of a spiritual infant tier became more and more terrifying. Even those elites in the spiritual pedestal tier were sweating bullets, and the others, needless to say, were all paralyzed like pools of sludge. Ling Han's figure raced rapidly as he simultaneously thought of a plan. If he drew out the demon birth sword, even if he wasn't able to activate the martial intent within it, merely the material used to forge a level 10 spiritual tool would be enough to defend against the martial intent of a spiritual infant tier elite. However, the problem was, if he actually revealed it in public, how much attention would he attract? If he was merely a single person, then it was fine. If worse came to worst, he could always choose to flee and relocate to a different place. However, his roots were now in Rain Country, in Diyuan City, in Gray Cloud Town. He could leave, but what about Ling Dongxing and his other relatives? The Ling clan had already experienced one catastrophe, so how could Ling Han bear to draw another deadly disaster onto the Ling clan, especially when it was because of him? No, he definitely could not use the demon birth sword. Ha 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 ha, in front of the decree of a spiritual infant tier elite, how long do you intend to keep running? Feng Yin laughed loudly. His master had given him this decree, so he could be unafraid even in front of the Rain Emperor himself. What more when this was merely a martial artist of the gushing spring tier he was facing now? Surrender yourself to death obediently, and don't think that you will be able to escape. Ling Han used shadow wind motion. This, too, was a black-grade high-level martial arts technique. Since he had already broken through to the gushing spring tier, the yellow-grade martial arts techniques he had used previously could of course be discarded, and they were all exchanged for the higher-level black-grade martial arts techniques. Feng Yin could not catch up. He was taught a black-grade high-level saber technique, and he had not fully learned it in over a month's time. So where would he have the time to learn other martial arts techniques? Ling Han was different. He had used all these techniques in his last life, but even if he hadn't, with the comprehension ability of someone who used to be in the heaven tier, how could learning them be difficult for him? Don't run. Feng Yin was in a towering rage, but he could do nothing against Ling Han. The latter was as nimble as an eel and unbelievably slippery, so he couldn't hit him at all. Ling Han merely smiled calmly and said, "Once the decree is unrolled, the martial intent within would begin to disperse. You using it in such a way is only hastening the rate of its dispersal, so how much longer would it last?" When one was talking about the understanding of the secrets of martial arts, who would understand more than he who had once been in the heaven tier? How did you know? Feng Yin was indeed greatly shocked. His master had told him so before. A decree was not a spiritual tool, and was only slightly more durable than a spiritual talisman, but it was still very limited in use. You don't have to bother yourself with that. Ling Han's sword waved and shot out a few flashes of sword chi. It was not his style to merely defend without attacking. Feng Yin did not use his saber. With a wave of the decree, the martial intent contained within was enough to shatter the sword chi. However, he became more and more irritable. If things went on this way, he would really expend all the martial intent contained in the decree until it was merely a piece of scrap paper. In the first place, he was a haughty person, and instantly, a violent light shone in his eyes. He turned back and the decree smacked onto a man's head. The martial intent spread out, and that man's head instantly exploded. Unfortunately, that man was under the suppression of the might of a spiritual infant tier elite, and so could only shiver as he lay on the ground. There was no way for him to dodge at all, so he could merely watch as misfortune fell on his head. Feng Yin! Everyone roared in fury. What was this guy planning to do? Ling Han, if you dare to dodge again, I will kill all the people here. Feng Yin declared coldly, his killing intent boiling. When these words were heard, everyone was both shocked and furious. Those who had arrived to attend the wedding today were all people in the upper social circles of the imperial city, and some were even elites of the spiritual pedestal tier. Yet Feng Yin actually dared to use their lives to threaten Ling Han. This was practically crazy. Feng Yin, you've gone too far. Many began to roar in fury. This is between you and Ling Han. What do we have to do with it? Don't make us look down on you. Feng Yin merely pretended as if he had not heard anything and said coldly, you're all just a group of trash. So what if I kill all of you? Who would dare do anything against me? If I use all my effort, it is not that I am unable to kill Ling Han, but that would force me to reveal my trump card, and that is not something I want to happen. Since I can use a faster way to kill him, what need is there for me to expend the extra effort? Everyone was even more furious, and all began to curse and shout. However, there was one thing that Feng Yin was right about. He could do as he liked, kill anyone he liked, but they would not dare to do anything to him because Feng Yin was a disciple of the Winter Moon sect. Who dared to make a move against a disciple of the Winter Moon sect? The most they could do would be to expel him from Rain Country. Ling Han, aren't you going to obediently surrender to your death? Or do you want so many people to die with you? Feng Yin laughed loudly, looking very arrogant. It was as if he was a cat that was toying with a mouse. With a wave of the decree, another dozen people was smacked into pieces. This guy indeed had a trump card. For example, he had not used the mirror light body. As a result, Ling Han was even more sure that this kind of special constitution had to be activated consciously. A special constitution that had to be consciously activated would expend energy, origin power, or spiritual energy, and there was a limit to all of these. It was impossible to keep it going at all times. On the other hand, Ling Han's body of rock cliff was a passive skill. He did not need to activate it for it to be effective. However, even if he actively circulated it, he would not be able to increase the firmness of his physical body. Additionally, Ling Han believed that Feng Yin must have had some kind of secret. Otherwise, he would not have battled the eldest imperial prince to a draw, and would not have been picked to become the disciple of a spiritual infant tier elite. Don't make me look lightly on you, Ling Han said. He would of course not wait quietly to be killed. Look lightly? Feng Yin laughed loudly and said haughtily, what right do you have to look lightly on me? Do you know that I should keep this secret for the moment? You want to die in vigorous battle? Impossible. I want you to die in a stupid and cowardly way. His thoughts turned, and he said, everyone, I can spare you, but you have to do something for me, and that is to apprehend Ling Han. I will give you the time of 3 breaths, and if by that time, Ling Han is still not kneeling before me, then I can only use this decree and kill all of you. So evil. Do not doubt my determination. Don't you all forget who I am, he said frostily. Their hearts trembled. Feng Yin was not an ordinary disciple of the Winter Moon sect, but the personal disciple of a grand elder. Previously, he dared to publicly oppose the eldest imperial prince, and now, even dared to brazenly commit murder without any kind of reservations at all. Feng Yin could do as he liked, but who could really do anything against him? With such thoughts, Feng Yin's threat was like a knife held at their necks, making them tremble with uncontrollable fear. Ling Han did not speak. He was merely trying to find an opening. I have given you all a chance, and if you want to live, You have to take hold of it firmly, Feng Yin said with a smile as he withdrew the decree and toyed with everyone as if they were all in the palm of his hand. He was extremely pleased with this feeling of being superior to everyone else. It was at this moment that Ling Han shot out like an arrow and instantly appeared in front of Feng Yin. Taking advantage of the opening created when Feng Yin withdrew the decree, he moved as quick as lightning, and his sword smacked onto Feng Yin's wrist. Pa! The decree instantly flew out of his grasp. Chapter 261. Chapter 261, Battle of Backgrounds. Shua! The decree streaked through the air, and there was a golden light bubbling forth. Both Ling Han and Feng Yin leaped through the air, chasing after the decree. Whoever was able to gain possession of the decree now would practically be getting hold of the life and death power in this situation. Pong, 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 pong. The two men entered into an endless exchange of moves in mid-air, but Ling Han was still at a slight advantage and managed to get the upper hand. Ling Han stretched out a hand, and just when his fingertips were about to touch the decree, he suddenly paused. Then he waved out his left hand, and the blood-sucking origin gold transformed into a golden thread that circled around the decree. Another toss, and he had cast off the decree far away from him. The decree floated calmly downwards. A man who had been standing at the side grew covetous and snatched it over in a single move. Who knew that just as his hand had just grabbed hold of it, his whole arm was reduced to a lump of bloody flesh with a paw, instantly causing the man to shriek in agony. Hong! Feng Yin stopped moving and said coldly, "You are quite cautious." Previously, he had indeed been caught off guard by Ling Han, but in the exchange of blows and fighting over to grab the decree that followed afterwards, it was not that he had been losing, but rather that he had held back some of his ability deliberately. He wanted to let Ling Han take hold of the decree and use that opportunity to crush Ling Han's arm. He had not thought that Ling Han would be so cautious, however. It was not that Ling Han was especially cautious. Instead, as someone who used to be an ultimate elite of the heaven tier, how could he be unaware of the taboos of a decree? He pretended that he was ignorant, made use of Feng Yan's own intent to harm others, and led the latter to actually discard the decree on his own. Now that Feng Yan had lost the decree as a threat, the others would naturally not have to obey his commands. In a one-against-one battle, Ling Han was unafraid. Feng Yan. Everyone was fuming in rage. A lowly martial artist from a humble background actually dared to threaten their lives. This was enough to make them all want nothing more but to devour him alive. "Don't be defiant," Feng Yan exclaimed arrogantly, his eyes sweeping over his surroundings. "You pieces of trash only know how to express your anger verbally, but do any of you actually dare to make a move against me?" "You." Quite a number of people roared loudly with reddened eyes. The relatives of those people Feng Yan had killed previously were especially furious, their bodies trembling with restrained anger. However, the Winter Moon sect was like a colossal behemoth that was pressing down on their heads. Who would dare make a move against Feng Yan when they were perfectly aware that he was a disciple of the Winter Moon sect? "Don't go, you pieces of trash." Feng Yan smirked icily and no longer bothered with the rest. He turned to Ling Han and said, "Though I am definitely going to kill you, but I have to admit that you are at least much braver than these pieces of trash since you actually dare to stand against me." Ling Han's sword tremored, and he said, "You are speaking too much nonsense. You had best wash your neck clean and prepare for death." "You really dare to kill me?" Feng Yan laughed. "Are you not afraid of the Winter Moon sect?" "So what about it?" Ling Han asked calmly. He was indeed not taking the Winter Moon sect to heart. No matter how much Feng Yan scrambled his brains, he could not possibly know that Ling Han used to be an ultimate elite of the heaven tier. Though his cultivation level had dropped, but how could his pride and scope drop as well? In the future, he would definitely be capable of once again returning to the heaven tier, and this would not take too much time. What more when there was still an Ao Feng in the Winter Moon sect, someone that Ling Han was definitely going to eliminate in the future. He was destined to face the Winter Moon sect in an open confrontation. In comparison, Feng Yan could only be considered a minor character. Ha 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 ha, what courage! Only killing such a man would be fulfilling. Feng Yin laughed loudly, pointed at Ling Han and said, "If it was not for the fact that you killed my younger brother, I really would not have wanted to kill you off so soon." Dream on. Ling Han attacked, his sword waving. Instantly, 6 flashes of sword chi danced together. "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Feng Yin shouted, and a faint silvery light flickered from his body. He waved his long saber in a slash that possessed the aggressive air of advancing forwards without any sign of retreat. "What a good saber!" Xiachong could not help but call out. "You're still praising this brat?" Lu Zhongtian rolled his eyes. This guy had almost killed them all off just moments ago. "That's quite another matter. This brat's saber arts is indeed not bad. If it wasn't for AI, even I have a bit of desire of take him as my disciple." Xiachong sighed with a shake of his head, looking like he felt it was really quite a pity. Ting, 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 ting. Ling Han and Feng Yin endlessly exchanged blows, and saber chi and sword chi danced vigorously through the air. At this point, Feng Yin had activated the mirror light body and was able to rebound about 20% of Ling Han's attacks. This was extremely astonishing, as not only was he able to reduce 20% of Ling Han's attack power, he was also able to reflect this attack power back onto Ling Han and strengthen his own attacks in the process. In the process of receiving attacks, Feng Yin's body was also flickering with silvery light, like it was a mirror that was about to shatter. Obviously, there was a limit to the attack power he could reflect. As long as this limit was exceeded, then he would not be able to reflect the attack and would be directly shattered instead. Ling Han's body of rock cliff also displayed its effects. He could more or less withstand the 20% of attack power that was reflected back onto him and only feel the slightest bit of discomfort. However, he only needed to circulate the indestructible heaven scroll, and this uncomfortable feeling would disappear without a trace. The two fighters' right hands wielded their respective weapons, while their left hands continued a barrage of punches and palm strikes. Even their legs would occasionally kick out at their opponent, creating one after another powerful attacks, with an astonishing might behind each attack. Those people around them were dumbfounded by this display. Who in the younger generation would still be capable of standing against these two? Too powerful. Feng Yin was a bit hesitant. This was not his full power, but if he wanted to kill Ling Han, then he would have to reveal some of his more powerful trump cards. Was it worth exposing his trump cards just for one Ling Han? Moreover, Ling Han should also have trump cards that he had not revealed yet. At least, he had not used that sword technique that contained a series of 4 sword intents, so Feng Yin could not help but keep a few cards up his sleeve as security. "I'm not late, am I?" At this moment, a hearty laughter was heard, and a tall old man strode over. With every step, it seemed as if there was a dazzling light under his feet, and a purple-colored light actually bloomed under his steps, like the blooming of a flower. This was martial intent, something that could only be produced by someone who was at least in the spiritual ocean tier. This man had already reached the spiritual pedestal tier. Who was he speaking to? Feng Yin laughed heartily and said, "Attendant Xiao, you're just in time. Hee, allow me to introduce myself. I am Qiu Ku, a little attendant of the Winter Moon sect," the old man said, all smiles, presenting an amiable attitude. Yet everyone's hearts almost stopped at that. An attendant of the Winter Moon sect. If Feng Yin could only be considered a mere disciple, then Qiu Ku could to a great extent represent the will of the Winter Moon sect. "Attendant Xiu, help me apprehend this brat," Feng Yin said. "All right." Qiu Ku nodded his head without hesitation. He did not put on any airs even though Feng Yin was much weaker than him in terms of cultivation level. This was naturally because he was giving face to that powerful elite of the spiritual infant tier standing behind Feng Yin. "You dare!" Fu Yuansheng instantly stepped out. Qiu Ku's eyes swept over and slightly narrowed as he said, "A black-grade high-level alchemist? Just let the young people deal with their own matters, where we, the older people, just stand by at one side," Fu Yuansheng said calmly, yet there was a forcefulness to his tone that would accept no rejection. As a member of the Alchemists Association, he was not afraid of the Winter Moon sect. Qiuku looked hesitant. Firstly, he had no desire to offend a high-level alchemist, and secondly, Fu Yuanshang was also in the spiritual pedestal tier. So even if he made a move, it was not certain that he would be able to kill Ling Han. Feng Yin smirked coldly and said, "Clan head Liu. This man has killed a son-in-law of the Liu clan. Could it be that the Liu clan wants to simply watch as he goes unpunished? I will not make things difficult for you either. As long as you help detain Master Fu, the benefits that I have promised to the Liu clan would not be reduced in any way." Chapter 262. Chapter 262. Domineering Rain Emperor. There were some who were aware that the reason the Liu clan had agreed to have Liu Yutong marry Feng Ming must have been because Feng Yin had promised them some kind of benefits, but how could such a deal that had been agreed upon so privately be announced right in front of so many people? Clan head Liu's face unconsciously darkened, but Feng Yin was completely unrestrained. Moreover, he had a terrifying background behind him, so what could he do even if he was very displeased? How could he really hang Feng Yin up and give him a thrashing? When he remembered the benefits that the Liu clan would be able to gain, clan head Liu merely hesitated for a while and then stood up, then said to Fu Yuanshang, "Grandmaster Fu, give me some face, and please do not interfere, all right?" Fu Yuanshang's expression changed drastically. He asked, "If I make a move, are you intending to stop me?" "That's right." Clan head Liu forced out through gritted teeth. "Liu Fei Pong, I am not very displeased, and in the future, perhaps the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion will not be selling one single medicinal pill to the Liu clan. Are you sure that you want to continue to anger me?" Fu Yuanshang said threateningly. Clan head Liu's hands trembled slightly, obviously embroiled in an inner struggle. However, he immediately replied, "Grandmaster Fu, please do not interfere." He was determined to side with Feng Yin. Fu Yuanshang was furious. He really did not know what kind of benefits Feng Yin had promised to the Liu clan that not only made them agree to deliver a genius member of their clan and even ruin their relations with the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. One had to understand that even though the Liu clan has developed their own alchemists, it was impossible that they would be able to supply enough alchemical pills to everyone. Thus, they would still have to visit the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion to replenish their supplies of alchemical pills. He humphed and said, "Then let me come and experience your battle prowess." Yet clan head Liu did not attack. As long as Fu Yuanshang did not move, he was definitely not going to attack. After all, the former was also in the spiritual pedestal tier, and if they really came to blows, they would be creating too much destruction, and this was still the Liu residence. "Attendant Xiao, there is no one capable of stopping you now," Feng Yin declared with a smile, his expression extremely arrogant and wild. Qiuku laughed loudly and strode towards Ling Han. There were in total 4 elites of the spiritual pedestal tier here at the moment, and 2 of them were obviously on Feng Yan's side. Only one was supporting Ling Han, while the remaining one, Jiabo Yun, seemed to have become a blind and deaf person and continued to sit without making any movement, looking completely at ease. Obviously, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion was willing to cheer Ling Han on, but was definitely not going to offend the Winter Moon sect for his sake. What was Ling Han going to do? Zhu Wujiao, the 7th Imperial Prince, and the others were all frowning, whereas the eldest and the 3rd Imperial Prince smirked coldly, who asked Ling Han to ignore their advice and insist on causing his own destruction, like an egg striking a rock. He deserved whatever he got. Ling Han sighed. Now that things had turned out this way, he could only choose to reveal his status as a black-grade high-level alchemist. "Hung, you actually dare to be insolent in my territory." It was at this moment that a voice filled with ultimate might was heard, causing the hearts of all the people gathered here to tremble. They all felt a reverence and fear that seemed to originate from the depths of their souls. Your Imperial Majesty," Clanhead Liu exclaimed in shock. This voice was precisely the voice of the current Emperor of Rain Country. Rain Emperor. Qiuku could not help but tense up. Though the Rain Emperor was in the spiritual pedestal tier as well, he was also the ruler of a nation. In terms of imposing manner, he was able to suppress all others in the spiritual pedestal tier. Not even he dared to underestimate the Rain Emperor. "This is my Rain Country, and not the Winter Moon sect." The Rain Emperor's voice was once again heard, loud and mighty as thunder. I can turn a blind eye to the enmity of the younger generation, but if the older generation intends to interfere, I will kill anyone I see doing that. So domineering. Qiuku was a spiritual pedestal tier elite of the Winter Moon sect, yet the Rain Emperor would still rebuke him in such a way. I will kill anyone I see doing that. How could the words of a ruler be mere words? The young people in the area were all incredibly excited. This was the Rain Emperor, and he was indeed a powerful ruler. Even faced with a powerful elite of the Winter Moon sect, he did not cower in the slightest. This made them all feel as if their blood was boiling in their veins, making them feel the urge to have a grand battle. Meanwhile, the expressions of the eldest and the third imperial prince were undergoing a massive change. They had not thought that the Rain Emperor himself would actually support Ling Han, and when they thought of their own positions, that was completely opposed to the Rain Emperor's stand. How were they going to inherit the throne this way? Only the seventh imperial prince was wearing an excited grin. He had gambled on the right choice. The Rain Emperor was a proud man, so how could he allow an outsider to undermine his authority on his own territory? Rain Emperor, your boasts are a bit too exaggerated. If an ultimate elite of the flower-blossoming tier came from my sect, would you still dare to say such a thing? Qiuku asked coldly. The Winter Moon sect was naturally more powerful than Rain Country, and he himself was at the same cultivation level as the Rain Emperor, so how could he be afraid of the latter? In the time of 3 breaths, get lost immediately. Otherwise, I will smack you right out of my country. The voice of the Rain Emperor was once again heard. His voice was cold and forceful. Haha, then I would really like to experience that. Qiuku looked towards Ling Han, his killing intent flaring. They were both in the spiritual pedestal tier. Moreover, he was also an attendant of the Winter Moon sect, so how could he be scared off simply by the Rain Emperor's words? He was still a little anxious, because he had not yet figured out where the Rain Emperor was at this moment. The voice rumbled as if it was coming from all directions, so he had no way to identify where it really came from. 1 breath. Everyone was counting down in their hearts, whereas Qiuku began to walk towards Ling Han. 2 breaths. Qiuku was not walking particularly quickly. He had completely pushed his alertness and awareness to their limits. He had long heard that the Rain Emperor was a genius of martial arts and possessed a terrifying battle prowess, so how could he dare to be careless? 3 breaths. Qiuku moved, his right hand forming into a gigantic, purple-colored hand. There were intricate patterns flickering with light on his palm, as if they were able to shatter the earth. Pong! The Rain Emperor's voice was once again heard. Pong! The roof was pierced through, and they could only see a gigantic golden fist descend down from the skies, crashing ruthlessly towards Qiuku. Son of Heaven Fist Technique. All 3 imperial princes gasped at the same time. No matter what kind of weapons they used personally, they had all naturally learnt the Son of Heaven Fist technique. However, when they saw this golden fist, they only felt endless shock. When the Son of Heaven's fist attacked, the whole world would be flattened. It was irresistible, and there was no counter to it. With this one fist, everyone merely felt as if they were as insignificant as ants. No matter what move they made to resist, it would only be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, an impossible feat, and their only fate would be to be completely crushed by the imperial might. Qiuku's expression changed drastically due to shock, and he hurriedly delivered his own attack upwards, creating a purple-colored nebula that went to receive that golden fist. Pong! Indeed, it was like a mantis attempting to stop a chariot in its tracks. With the crushing power of the golden fist, the nebula was instantly shattered into smithereens. The golden fist landed, pong, and an irresistible force gushed out. Pong, 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 pong. Every single person in the main hall was forced backwards as if they were mere stalks of straw. Dust and smoke filled the air, and they could only see that the whole main hall was completely flattened into a plain, and the only person who had not been flung out of the main hall was Qiuku. This guy, was he dead or alive? After the dust and smoke had dispersed a little, they could see that Qiuku was lying on the ground in the shape of the Chinese character for Big One, and the slightly rising and falling of his chest obviously meant that he was still alive. Everyone inhaled sharply in shock. Chioku was in the spiritual pedestal tier, yet the Rain Emperor was able to crush him like a wretch without even once showing his face. Wasn't the Rain Emperor too powerful already? Was this really the power that someone in the spiritual pedestal tier should have? Even one as arrogant as Feng Yin had his mouth tightly closed. In front of absolute power, everyone could only tremble in fear. Ling Han, Feng Yin, I shall allow the two of you to settle between yourselves the private enmity between you two, but if anyone else wants to interfere, this man will be their example. The Rain Emperor's voice was once again heard, a vibrating rumble. Even if there were 3 others in spiritual pedestal tier present, they were still unable to identify where this voice was coming from. Ling Han, come see me at the Imperial Palace. Chapter 263. Chapter 263. Audience with the Emperor. From start to finish, the Rain Emperor did not even show his face, yet his domineering attitude was enrooted deep into everyone's hearts. Even such powerful elites like Fu Yuansheng and the clan head of the Lu clan felt a deep-set reverence and did not have the slightest intention of resistance. This was a real ruler. Once the order was given, it would be strictly enforced. All of them were his subjects under his imperial graciousness. Ling Han's eyes were turned towards the far-off imperial palace, however, as his divine sense had managed to identify that the Rain Emperor's voice had actually originated from there. If anyone else found out, they would definitely grab their heads and exclaim in shock. How could this be possible? There was a distance of at least 10 miles, so how could sound be transmitted so quickly and so clearly here? Moreover, there was still a punch from the Son of Heaven fist technique that actually punched an elite of spiritual pedestal tier unconscious. This was practically like a myth. That was too powerful, wasn't it? Spiritual pedestal tier would definitely not have such power. Ling Han mused internally. Could it be that the Rain Emperor has already broken through to the flower blossoming tier? Though there was only one tier between the spiritual pedestal tier and the flower blossoming tier, the taking of this step was like the gulf between heaven and earth. The spiritual pedestal tier was still considered mortal, whereas the flower blossoming tier would be stepping into the ranks of gods. Only one in the flower blossoming tier would be able to transmit sound over 10 miles as if they were right on the scene. With a single thought, his fist intent had reached its target and easily suppressed an opponent of the spiritual pedestal tier. That's not right. Ling Han frowned slightly. He had somewhat captured a sliver of the Rain Emperor's divine sense, and it should not have reached the flower blossoming tier yet, so this was indeed very strange. Ling Han, I shall allow you to continue living for 10 days. After 10 days, I will personally take your life. Feng Yin laughed coldly and grabbed Chioku in a single move. He leaped up and very quickly disappeared from sight. No one dared to stop him, even if he had killed so many just moments ago. Ling Han, the 7th Imperial Prince, approached, his face filled with delight. He had made the right bet on the Rain Emperor's personality. This ruler of a nation was a domineering man, so how could he be able to tolerate the Winter Moon sect undermining of his authority on his own territory? He would definitely return a powerful counterattack. However, even he had not foreseen that the Rain Emperor's attitude would be as forceful as this, so much that he had directly thrashed Chioku unconscious. No matter what, he had taken the right step, so he would have definitely gained a considerable favor of the Rain Emperor, so he was one step closer to the imperial throne. My imperial father summoned you, so you had better make a move on, he said, all smiles. The Rain Emperor very rarely deigned to see anyone on an one-to-one basis. Previously, merely Qin Yi and Zhao Huan had obtained such an honor. Even them, the imperial princes, very rarely gained the opportunity to see the Rain Emperor alone. Ling Han nodded at him. A friend in need was a friend indeed. In comparison, the performance of the eldest and the 3rd imperial prince were far below standard. He glanced at Lu Yutong. His little female attendant was naturally being supported by the clansmen of the Lu clan. He considered it for a moment, but did not go over to say anything, primarily because he was displeased with the Lu clan. The Rain Emperor had clearly expressed his attitude. Moreover, he had delivered a fist straight on the heads of the Liu clan, obviously expressing his displeasure towards the Liu clan. Ling Han believed that the Liu clan would not dare to continue to have secret dealings with Feng Yan. Young Master Han. The eldest and the third imperial princes simultaneously approached, a fake smile on their faces while their hearts were ill at ease. They were practically ready to die of regret. No matter how much they had calculated, they had not foreseen the fact that the Rain Emperor would actually make such a domineering move. They witnessed the way Feng Yan had paraded around so arrogantly before, but did not see any kind of reaction from the imperial family and thought it would be the same this time. They had not thought that there would be any kind of unexpected accident today. If they had known beforehand, they would have put their firm support behind Ling Han. They would then be able to have a deeper relation with the latter, and would also be able to obtain the Rain Emperor's favor. And now, great, they had offended both sides. Ling Han merely smiled calmly and said, "I have to meet His Imperial Majesty, so I don't have the time to converse with your Imperial Highnesses." After saying so, he flung his arms and stalked off. The eyes of the eldest and the third imperial princes were simultaneously filled with anger. He was a mere humble commoner, and yet he actually dared to show his displeasure in the face of two such imperial princes as them. But now was not the time to make a fuss over this. The seventh imperial prince had suddenly acted, and was now ahead of them in the race for the imperial throne. In view of the imperial throne, whatever else could be set aside. The two of them exchanged a look and smiled at the same time. Their seventh younger brother's limelight was too bright, so they had to suppress him a bit to ensure that all three of them would once again return to the same starting line. Ling Han gave a nod to Guang Yuan and the rest, and also signaled for Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujio to bring Hun Yo and return first. He, meanwhile, strode towards the imperial palace. The distance of about 10 miles was only the matter of a dozen minutes for someone in the gushing spring tier, so he was very soon standing in front of the imperial palace. "Please follow me." An imperial guard approached. He had an average-sized figure and looked like he was only in his 30s, yet he was already in the spiritual ocean tier. In Rain Country, this was an extremely astonishing fact. Since the Rain Emperor had summoned him, naturally everything was arranged in order to receive him. Ling Han followed the imperial guard and asked, "How do I address you, sir?" "Zaixiang," the imperial guard replied coolly, seeming to share the same style as Kan Yi. "Prime Minister?" Ling Han could not help but blank out as he thought, "Your parents must be disappointed that you are now a martial officer instead." "Xiang, not Xiang," Zaixiang said calmly. Who knew what kind of Xiang he was talking about? But since he had explained, it meant that his name was definitely not Zaixiang, as in Prime Minister. Ling Han lagged, and did not continue making a fuss over the issue of names. After all, the other was in the spiritual ocean tier, so he had best not irritate him to the point that he would turn around and smack him flat. This man should be a confidant of the Rain Emperor. He was already in the spiritual ocean tier in his 30s, and once he was fully developed by the Rain Emperor, it was possible that he would be able to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier in his 40s. Zaixiang was obviously not a talkative man. If Ling Han did not ask questions, he would definitely not open his mouth. As he led Ling Han inwards, all the imperial guards on their way paid their respects to Zaixiang upon seeing him, without any signs of wanting to question Ling Han's identity. Evidently, Zaixiang's status had gotten the approval of all the imperial guards. The two of them very quickly arrived at the main heaven hall. This was where the Rain Emperor handled the country's affairs, and where the ministers and officials would pay their respects. It was now past the time for the government conference. As a result, the whole hall was visibly empty and spacious. "Go in by yourself," Zaixiang said coldly. What a cold, unfeeling guy, Ling Han thought as he walked into the main hall. This was the largest palace hall in the Imperial Hall. The colossal palace hall was held up by tall stone pillars that were as tall as 100 meters, giving one an imposing and grand feeling that would cause one's heart to tremble. Casting an eye over, the whole palace hall was empty. However, Ling Han knew that there was an imperial guard hidden behind each stone pillar, and they were all in the spiritual ocean tier. At the end of the palace hall, there was a throne positioned high up, and on it was seated a man who looked to be in his 50s. He was obviously seated, yet the domineering aura exuding from him was enough to cause one to tremble in fear. The Rain Emperor? He should be turning 60 very soon, but he looked only to be in his early 50s. He really did a good job in maintaining his youthful looks. There was a woman seated by the Rain Emperor's foot, who seemed to be serving him, but Ling Han could tell that this woman was actually in the process of cultivating. It was actually Suku Xian. They all said that this woman was being doted on, and it was indeed true since she was actually able to accompany the emperor even by day. However, didn't accompanying the emperor mean that she was supposed to cater to the emperor's needs? How could she be cultivating? This was indeed odd. Moreover, Ling Han could confirm with a single glance that the Rain Emperor was definitely not a man that would be easily influenced by feminine wiles. Otherwise, he would not have been able to obtain the power that he had now. He had half a step into the flower-blossoming tier. No, half a step into the flower-blossoming tier would only mean that he was close to breaking through to the flower-blossoming tier, but in truth, he would still be in the spiritual pedestal tier, and still a mere mortal. Ling Han's thoughts flashed by quickly in his head, and he figured out that this was probably related to the power of the nation, which allowed the Rain Emperor to stride over that gap of half a step and truly possess the might of an ultimate elite of the flower-blossoming tier. "Young man, you are giving me a headache," the Rain Emperor spoke, and boundless might stirred with his voice. Chapter 264. Chapter 264, Beating. Ling Han raised his clasped hands politely in the Rain Emperor's direction and said, "This young junior hereby pays respects to your Imperial Majesty." Since he had addressed himself as junior, the respects he paid were naturally that of a martial artist to his senior, so there was no need to kneel or bow. If he was greeting the Rain Emperor as a subject, then he would have to kneel. Those were two absolutely different standpoints. The Rain Emperor did not rebuke him. Instead, he smiled and said, "Young man, you are very proud." By his feet, Suku Xian was awakened by the noise. When she opened her eyes and looked at Ling Han, she could not help but look slightly surprised. She had obviously met this young man before and had even once thought of killing him before, though she had not made the move to in the end. She had never thought that this person would actually be qualified to meet with the Rain Emperor. This was extremely surprising. "Your Imperial Majesty is the real mighty one here." Merely one punch was able to completely defeat that damn attendant of the Winter Moon sect, making this junior's blood boil with excitement. Ling Han complimented. "Ha ha ha ha." The Rain Emperor laughed loudly, shook his head and said, "Do you think that just because you speak a little flattery, I will forget the trouble you've caused?" Suku Xian could not help but be astonished. She had been by the Rain Emperor's side for a number of years, but had almost never seen the Rain Emperor laugh so hard before. He had even used a teasing tone to speak to a young man. This was practically unbelievable to her. Ling Han said seriously, "Please forgive me, Your Imperial Majesty." The Rain Emperor humphed and said, "No matter how angry I was, I would not dare to do anything to a black-grade high-level alchemist." Suku Xian could not help but stare with wide eyes. A black-grade high-level alchemist? This young man in front of her? How could this be? But the Rain Emperor would not be speaking false words, so no matter how unbelievable it was to her, it had to be the truth. Ling Han laughed and said, "I had not yet thanked Your Imperial Majesty for helping me out of a difficult situation. I will definitely repay your favor in the future." Since the Rain Emperor had pointed out his status as a black-grade high-level alchemist, then he would speak with the Rain Emperor as an alchemist. In terms of status, he was only slightly beneath the latter. The Rain Emperor tapped lightly on the armrest of his throne and said, "My eldest, my third, and my seventh son, you have met all of them before. Who do you think is more appropriate to inherit the throne?" Should he be asked this kind of question? Ling Han thought for a moment, then replied, "You should have made your decision long before in your heart, Your Imperial Majesty. I would not dare to speak any lies. You are a black-grade high-level alchemist. Fu Yuanshang and Wu Songlin both take your opinion into account greatly. If you hold a different opinion than I and influence the alchemists not to sell any more medicinal pills to the citizens of Rain Country in the future, then wouldn't that mean destruction for the Rain Empire? The Rain Emperor said calmly. Ling Han could not help but be covered in a cold sweat. This crime was a bit big, and added together with the fact that rulers tended to be temperamental, if he really thought that Ling Han was going to be a problem that would threaten his imperial authority, then no matter who he was, he would directly eliminate him. He had pushed his alertness to the highest level it could go. If there was any movement from the Rain Emperor, he would instantly enter into the Black Tower. The most that would do would be allowing the Rain Emperor to discover that he had a secret technique that allowed him to teleport instantly or think he had a secret hideout. Even if he was forced to reveal some of his secrets, that was still better than losing his life. Put your little heart safely back into your chest. If I really wanted to kill you, you would not have survived on the whole way here, the Rain Emperor said calmly. Ling Han laughed. Although he looked relieved on the surface, he was not the slightest bit relaxed internally. He was not one who would easily trust anyone. Ling Han, how should I treat you? The Rain Emperor said. An alchemist that can concoct foundation-building pills. The foundations of Rain Country could be disturbed greatly because of you. Pooh. Suku Xian could finally not hold herself back from coughing. The foundation-building pills that had created so much commotion in the Imperial City were actually concocted by Ling Han? Inconceivable, really inconceivable. He was so young. So how could he actually be able to concoct foundation-building pills? Ling Han thought for a moment, then said, in the future, if I concoct any more foundation-building pills, I can prioritize supplying half to the Imperial family first. Good. The Rain Emperor finally smiled, and the tense atmosphere was instantly dispersed. Accompanying the Emperor was really like accompanying a tiger. An emperor was always temperamental and would kill anyone at the drop of a hat, so even if you wanted to be calm, it wasn't that easily accomplished. Ling Han could not help but criticize silently. If he still had the cultivation he had in his last life, he would definitely have given the Rain Emperor a good thrashing for actually daring to scare him. However, at this moment, he could only grimace and said, I was almost scared to death by your Imperial Majesty. The Rain Emperor gave a bit of foreshadowing first, then came a threat. All that was merely for the foundation-building pills. Haha, you will definitely become an Earth-grade alchemist in the future. By then, even I would have to welcome you heartily. Taking advantage of this time when your wings are not full yet, I naturally have to give you a little beating and bully you a bit, as I will not have the chance to do so in the future, the Rain Emperor said smilingly. Ling Han smiled as well. Actually, the Rain Emperor was also a man with a sense of humor, though that would depend on whether he wanted you to feel that he was an interesting, humorous man. My eldest and my third sons are still a bit lacking in terms of disposition. They have ambition, but do not have the fitting manner for it, the Rain Emperor said, giving a little judgment to his sons. My seventh is a bit too cautious. He is an adequate defender, but will not advance enough. He paused, then said, You should be supporting my seventh. With the support of a future Earth-grade alchemist, I can rest easy and abdicate. I have decided, after my 60th birthday, I shall pass on the throne to my seventh, and from then on, concentrate my focus on martial arts. Suku Xian was greatly shocked, her face paling. She could not help but call out, Your Imperial Majesty. The Rain Emperor pressed down with one hand, stopping her from speaking further, then said, You should leave now as well. Ling Han did not pay any mind to the enigmatic words between the two of them, and said, Congratulations, Your Imperial Majesty. Why are you congratulating me? The Rain Emperor asked, smiling. When you have left behind the matters of the nation, you will be able to concentrate on breaking through to flower-blossoming tier, and will be thus able to cast off your mortal chains and ascend to godhood. Ling Han said with a smile. The Rain Emperor could not help his eyes lighting up. Instantly, his aura gushed out like the waves of the sea, and he said, You can actually tell my cultivation level? Ling Han smiled slightly and said neutrally, I am an alchemist, so my divine sense has to be much stronger than any ordinary person. The Rain Emperor nodded. This young man was indeed extraordinary. Otherwise, he couldn't have possibly concocted alchemical pills close to Earth grade when he was merely in the gushing spring tier. He once again tapped his finger on the armrest and said, "Half a month later, I will organize a feast for my birthday. At that time, there will also be a martial arts competition held in celebration of my birthday." Ling Han did not know what was the significance of these words, so he only nodded and did not reply. For the person who gets the first place in the martial arts competition, the prize will be a treasure in the inner chamber of the National Treasury, the Rain Emperor said calmly. Ling Han was moved instantly. The Eye of Truth. The Rain Emperor was already half a step into the flower-blossoming tier, and added together with the power of the nation, he was like a god in Rain Country. Thus, his eyes and ears were practically everywhere in this country. Most likely, the few deals that he had made with the eldest and the third imperial prince had not escaped the knowledge of this Rain Emperor. Ling Han tensed up. Then what about the issue of the Lu sisters? Technically, he had covered for the criminals that had intended to assassinate an imperial consort. This was no different than committing treason. He should not know. The Rain Emperor was human, after all. Even if he had broken through to the flower-blossoming tier, he would only be no longer mortal, but he would still be a very far ways off from becoming a god. He could only be able to concentrate his limited attention on a few important people. For example, his 3 sons who all had the ability to qualify for the competition for the throne. Their every move must not have escaped his knowledge, as he secretly compared and mused over which one was more suited to inherit the throne. Thus, the fact that Ling Han had discussed stealing the Eye of Truth with the eldest and the third imperial princes must not have escaped the knowledge of this Rain Emperor. Now, the Rain Emperor had taken out the Eye of Truth as a prize. The unspoken words here were, "I am well aware of all your little moves. As long as you are willing to listen to me, then I will naturally give you some benefits." No wonder he was the ruler of a nation. He was very skilled at manipulating. Chapter 265. Chapter 265. Setting the conditions. With regards to the Eye of Truth, Ling Han was determined to get it. Ling Han thought for a moment, then said, "Your Imperial Majesty, the Eye of Truth involves a mystical power, and by that time, there will definitely be uncountable numbers of people participating. Perhaps even elites of the spiritual pedestal tier would shamelessly make a move. I really do not have much confidence." Unless he revealed the Black Tower. However, once the Black Tower was out, there would be ultimate elites from godly tiers descending to snatch it. It was much more important than any mystical power. The Rain Emperor laughed, then said, "You don't have to play the fox in front of me. In the competition this time, I have limited the participants to only those below 30 years old. If you are not able to get first place, then you can only blame yourself for lacking in ability." Ling Han thought for a moment. If only those below 30 could participate, then the only one who could stand against him as an equal was Feng Yin. "You are a citizen of Rain Country. I want you to defeat Feng Yin in public, to show the might of Rain Country," the Rain Emperor said. Indeed, it was exactly like what Ling Han had guessed. Looks like Feng Yin had paraded around too much previously, and he had even casually killed off a number of noble, wealthy people previously. The Rain Emperor was angered as well. However, no matter how mighty and domineering the Rain Emperor was, he was the ruler of a nation first and foremost, so he could not simply do anything rash. If he had killed Feng Yin, then that would definitely attract the real elites of the Winter Moon sect. By that time, even if Rain Country was not destroyed, it would still have to pay a colossal price to soothe the flames of rage of the Winter Moon sect. This was definitely not something that a mature emperor would do. However, should he just allow Feng Yin to behave so arrogantly and do as he liked? The Rain Emperor was a very domineering man. He naturally could not allow such a troublemaker to create a fuss right in front of his eyes. Since he could not kill Feng Yin, then he would just have to make it so that Feng Yin was defeated publicly, take the edge off his spirit, and teach him a lesson. Ling Han nodded. Even without the Rain Emperor's request, he was definitely not going to have any reservations against Feng Yin. If he had the opportunity, he would definitely not mind killing off this guy. "Go on." The Rain Emperor waved his hand, and closed his eyes as if he had fallen asleep. Obviously, he was not intending to speak to Ling Han anymore. Ling Han retreated out of the palace hall and left the imperial palace under Zai Xiang's escort. The latter turned around and walked 2 steps, then suddenly turned back round and said, "Ling Han, do not disappoint the hopes of His Imperial Majesty." Without waiting for Ling Han's answer, he stalked off, looking very forceful. Ling Han shook his head. The Rain Emperor was domineering because he had the ability to support his domineering ways. Every word and movement that Zai Xiang made was an imitation of the Rain Emperor. However, he had only learnt the appearance, yet had not managed to learn the essence. He could not bother himself to call him to account, and headed back towards Huyang Academy instead. "Ling Han, was it?" A delicate voice was heard from behind him, enchanting and graceful. Ling Han turned to look, and Suku Xian was standing right behind him. Her shapely, delicate body drawing the eyes of anyone who saw her. However, Ling Han did not give her another look and asked, "Is there anything I can help you with?" He was now a black-grade high-level alchemist, so there was absolutely no need for him to speak reverently to an imperial consort. "I had not thought that a minor character would have actually become a grandmaster alchemist by now." Suku Xian shook her head, then lowered herself into a slight bow. Her white skirts fluttered, like a flower blooming. "Ku Xian hereby greets Grandmaster." Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "I dare not accept. Imperial Consort Su, your greeting is much too polite." Suku Xian stood back up, pursed her lips into a smile, then said, "Grandmaster, Ku Xian would like to make a request of you." "Imperial Consort Su, you seem to have made a request of the wrong person, right? His Imperial Majesty, the Rain Emperor, is the ruler of Rain Country, so whatever you need, the person you should make the request to should be His Imperial Majesty, the Rain Emperor, shouldn't it?" Ling Han said. Suku Xian sighed and looked a bit sad. If anyone uninvolved had seen, they would definitely be overcome with sympathy for her and touched by her pitiful appearance. Unfortunately, this move was completely useless on Ling Han. "Grandmaster does not know, but Ku Xian is only His Imperial Majesty's consort by name," she said slowly, when she saw Ling Han was looking completely undisturbed and calm. "Oh." Ling Han nodded, then turned around to leave. "Wait." Ku Xian hurriedly caught up with him, then said, "Ku Xian would like to use a cultivation technique to exchange for 10 foundation building pills." She was now at the 3rd layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and there was still a far way until the 9th layer. However, for all cultivation tiers below the flower blossoming tier, breaking through to the next layer was not really that difficult. It was only a matter of time. Thus, she would be able to attempt breaking through to the spiritual pedestal tier a few years later, so if she had 10 foundation building pills in her possession, the chances of success for her would be greatly increased. Ling Han could not help but laugh, and said, "Imperial Consort Su has a large appetite. You're talking about 10 foundation building pills, not 10 return origin pills." In truth, in the eyes of an alchemy emperor like him, there was not really that much difference between foundation building pills and return origin pills. Suku Xian was also aware that she was asking for too much, but in a bargain, how could she allow the other to know how much she could accept at the first instant? She said, "That is because the cultivation technique that Ku Xian has offered for the exchange is definitely worth this price." "Oh, tell me then," Ling Han said non-committally. "Grandmaster, please follow Ku Xian to a quiet place," Suku Xian said. Ling Han was slightly curious, so he agreed. The two of them went to a tea house, requested for a private room, and sat opposite of each other. "What is the cultivation technique you were speaking of?" Ling Han had no intention to beat around the bush. Suku Xian could tell Ling Han was impatient, so she did not continue to tantalize him and replied, "Shapeless Heart Sutra, the complete 6 layers of the cultivation technique." Instantly, a few thoughts flew past in Ling Han's head, and he was able to connect the series of events. Putting aside the grade of the Shapeless Heart Sutra, the important thing was that there were the complete 6 layers of the cultivation technique. This meant that it could be cultivated all the way to the flower-blossoming tier. And what was the thing that the 9 nations of the desolate north lacked the most? That would be cultivation techniques for the flower-blossoming tier. This was what limited the appearance of elites of the flower-blossoming tier. Those that had depended on the power of nation being instilled in them to break through were not considered. They were not capable of leaving their own countries at all. Otherwise, once they had lost the support of the power of the nation, they would instantly be returned to their original form. Additionally, if their age had exceeded their natural lifespan, they could even immediately die of old age upon leaving the country's borders. The Rain Emperor had a unique relationship with Suku Xin. Recalling when she previously said that she was merely the Rain Emperor's consort name, he could mostly confirm that Suku Xin must have made a similar deal with the Rain Emperor. The reason she had broken through to the spiritual ocean tier in a few years' time was most likely because she could make use of the power of the nation to aid her in her cultivation. Thinking further, Suku Xin fell out with the falling flower court. Could it really be because of a staying youth pill? The real reason should have been the shapeless heart sutra, which caused a desire to take it for herself to arise in Suku Xin. Or perhaps the higher ranks of the falling flower court wanted to kill her off to keep the secret, but were instead foiled by Suku Xin making the first move, which led to the destruction of the falling flower court. Perhaps Suku Xin had fled to Rain Country after that, and reached some kind of agreement with the Rain Emperor. As a result, the Rain Emperor was able to advance one step further, and have half a step into the flower-blossoming tier, and managed to pry open the door to the flower-blossoming tier. It would not take long for him to really step over the threshold into the flower-blossoming tier. Suku Xin would never have thought that while she had only mentioned the name of a cultivation technique that allowed Ling Han to figure out so many things. If she were to find out, she would definitely be shocked by Ling Han's deduction ability. Ling Han was naturally uninterested in the Shapeless Heart Sutra, putting aside 6 layers of cultivation technique. Even if there were 9 complete layers, he could not bother himself to give it a second look. He said calmly, "I'm still very far from the flower-blossoming tier, so I'm not interested at this time." Suku Xion's mouth was slightly open, as she was incredibly astonished. Chapter 266. Chapter 266. Deal. In Suku Xion's thoughts, a 6-layer cultivation technique was extremely tempting to all martial artists in Rain Country. No, all 9 nations of the desolate north, because this allowed one to take the most important step, which was to cast off their mortal body and gain the qualifications to become a god. Of course, the flower-blossoming tier was still very far from becoming a god, but it was undoubtedly the first step towards that end. She tossed out such a bait, and believed that Ling Han would definitely be hooked. She was so certain, but had never thought that Ling Han would actually refuse, and what more, refuse without the slightest bit of hesitation. Could it be, little brother, could it be that you already possess a 6-layer cultivation technique? Suku Xion hints played cute. She was still very delicately pretty, her charms overflowing. Ling Han asked, "Does Imperial Consort Su think that's possible?" Of course, it was impossible. How could Rain Country have a 6-layer cultivation technique? Suku Xion was thinking in her head, but Ling Han had refused too decisively, so she still felt as if the latter may also have possibly gotten hold of a 6-layer cultivation technique. She had never wavered so much in her life, so she really felt like she was about to go crazy. Ling Han actively answered her confusion and said, "I am an alchemist. So do I need that high a cultivation level?" That was logical. At such a young age, he was already an alchemist close to Earth grade, so he must have boundless future prospects ahead of him. Moreover, a person had limited energy, so if he spread out his attention over too many fields due to greed, that would only lead to him not being able to master any one field. Suku Xion was still a bit doubtful, but it was not proper for her to keep asking. After all, she had something to ask of Ling Han. She hesitated for a long time, then said, "I also have a treasure that I can put into the trade." "Oh, and what is that?" Ling Han asked casually. "I don't know either." Suku Xion shook her head. Because everything was not like what she had expected, she was completely shaken, and so she hid all her seductive wiles and became serious. Ling Han could not help but break into laughter, and asked, "Are you joking, Imperial Consort Su? How could there be something like this?" She said she wanted to trade a treasure, but she didn't even know what it was. If that was the case, how could she be so sure that it really was a treasure? Suku Xian said, 7 years ago, I and a few elders of Mi sect discovered an ancient tomb. We obtained the Shapeless Heart Sutra from there. And beside the Shapeless Heart Sutra, there was also a tightly sealed box that we had no way of opening. She paused a moment, then said, something that could be placed by the side of the Shapeless Heart Sutra. This box must contain something that is similarly valuable. Ling Han smiled slightly, then said, Does Imperial Consort Su want to use this unknown object to exchange for the 10 foundation building pills then? That's right. Suku Xian nodded. Is Grandmaster willing to gamble on it? All right, Ling Han said without hesitation. Anyways, he could casually concoct foundation building pills easily and quickly, so even if he had traded them for an ordinary box, that would only be a waste of a few million silver coins and about an hour's time. But what if the box really contains some kind of treasure? Tomorrow, at this time, bring the box over, whereas I will bring the foundation building pills, he said. Suku Xian was ecstatic, but then she hurriedly confirmed, That's 10 foundation building pills. Agreed. Ling Han nodded. Deal. Suku Xian was overjoyed at this unexpected turn in events. Ling Han stood up and left. Since he had already decided to accept this transaction, he would naturally have to go and prepare the ingredients he needed. Unfortunately, the herb garden within the Black Tower was not yet ready. Otherwise, he could prepare his own ingredients. After all, he had only left the Mystery Realm just a few days ago, so how could it be possible that he would have gotten all the spiritual herbs ready so quickly? He naturally went to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. After thanking Fu Yuansheng, he bought all the ingredients needed to concoct the foundation building pills, then returned to Huyang Academy. There was a large number of people waiting for him at the entrance who wanted to develop an amiable relationship with him. After all, he had just been summoned to see the Rain Emperor, and the Emperor's concern over him was still going strong. However, how could Ling Han have the mood to deal with them? He merely said a few words and sent off these people. When he entered his courtyard, Hunyo instantly stuck onto him. Ling Han said a few words to her, then brought her with him into the Black Tower. The little girl very happily began to play around, whereas Ling Han began to concoct the alchemical pills. This was naturally a piece of cake to him. After arranging all the ingredients he needed, after a mere hour, 10 foundation building pills were lying warm in the furnace. The next day, the imperial family released a piece of important news. The Rain Emperor's 60th birthday was right around the corner, and the whole country was naturally going to celebrate with him. Moreover, there was also going to be a very special martial arts tournament to display the military power of the empire. The champion of this tournament would be personally praised by the Rain Emperor, and the prize would be a mystical power. What kind of object was a mystical power? A large majority of people were not aware, but that did not stop everyone from guessing the incredible value of a mystical power. The Rain Emperor had taken it out as a prize, so how could it be anything ordinary? All of a sudden, excitement was high in the air. Even the powerful elites of the spiritual pedestal tier of the 8 great clans were restless, but when they saw the rules of participation for the martial arts tournament, quite a number of people wilted as the tournament was only limited to those below 30 years old. True, the future of the empire would naturally fall on the shoulders of the younger generation, so what was the point of old men like them joining in on the excitement? 30 years below, then there would only be 2, and that was Ling Han and Feng Yin. Anyone with eyes could see that this was the tournament stage that the Rain Emperor had set up for the 2 of them to allow them to duel in front of everyone's eyes. Mystical power? Within the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, Yin Tian Zhao mumbled to himself. He had a wine cup in his hand and was seated comfortably, filled with an unworldly air. By his side, there was an old woman who looked vacant, as if she had lost her soul. If one were to look closely, this old woman looked very much alike Lady Yin. I was intending to leave Rain Country, but did not think that I would be able to watch such a good show before I left. Now I have even encountered the appearance of a mystical power. There are strong and weak mystical powers, but no matter what, Since it is called a mystical power, it must have its use, so I would not mind taking a look at it. Yin Tianzhao placed the wine cup down, looked towards the old woman, then said with a smile, "Mother, I will become the champion of a martial arts tournament and show my face in front of everyone. Aren't you glad?" She was indeed Lady Yin, but how did she suddenly lose all her beauty and become an old woman? Lady Yin seemed to have become a corpse. After quite a while, a flash of life finally came back into her eyes. Her voice trembled, and she said, "You are not my son. You are a demon. You are a demon." "Wrong. I am indeed your son. It's just that I have some additional experiences." Yin Tianzhao pointed at his own head, and an incomparably evil smile curled up the corners of his lips. "I still have to thank you, Mother, for transmitting all your cultivation to me. Otherwise, if I wanted to possess the cultivation level I have now, I would have to cultivate at least 8 to 10 years. Lady Yin merely shook her head and said endlessly, "You are not my son. You are not my son." Yin Tianzhao turned his eyes from her, took up the wine cup, and began to drink. He said to the skies, "Everyone thinks that the champion of this tournament will be either Ling Han or Feng Yin. Then I shall give everyone a slap and let them know that I, Yin Tianzhao, am still here." In the afternoon, Ling Han went to the tea house he had gone to yesterday to fulfill the deal with Suku Xian. 10 foundation building pills. Ling Han casually withdrew a jade bottle and placed it on the table. Suku Xian was very delighted, so she could not help but show off some of her feminine wiles, and said delicately, "Little brother, aren't you scared that big sister will cheat you out of your alchemical pills?" "You can try," Ling Han said calmly. "AI, you don't have the slightest sense of humor." Suku Xian shook her head and took up a box that was wrapped with a red cloth from her side and placed it on the table. Chapter 267. Chapter 267, 100 Poison Jade Ointment. Of course, Ling Han did not completely trust Suku Xian. As such, he immediately unwrapped the cloth, and there was indeed a black-colored box inside. It was not made of metal, but rather of wood, and there was a faint sandalwood aroma coming from it. He was in the process of examining the box, whereas Suku Xian was naturally examining the foundation-building pills, and neither of them spoke. There was indeed no way to open it. It was not because it was locked, but rather because it was joined seamlessly together, so there was nowhere one could exert force on. From the looks of it, the only way to open it would be through explosive power. Ling Han looked astonished, because he recognized the type of wood. Connect Origin Heartwood. This was an extremely valuable material. It had 2 special traits to it. Firstly, it was extremely tough and durable, and secondly, it was capable of preventing the dispersal of spiritual qi. Thus, this was a very suitable material to store some valuable medicinal ingredients. Once it was closed, the medicinal ingredients could be stored for 1,000 or even 10,000 years without spoiling. He gave it a shake, and there was something inside. From what he could hear, there should only be one object inside. It felt very heavy, but it was impossible for him to say what exactly it was. "Little brother, big sister thanks you," Suku Xian said with a delicate smile, putting away the jade bottle with satisfaction. Though she wanted very much to know what was contained inside the wooden box, and wanted even more to confirm that it was a treasure, she had studied it for many years and attempted many different methods but was still unable to open it. Thus, she decided that she might as well hand it over to Ling Han so that she would no longer have to worry herself over it. After all, what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Ling Han ignored her, so she was a bit unsatisfied. However, because she was in a great mood, she did not take it to heart. She pushed open the door and left. After she had left, Ling Han instantly gave a swipe of his hand, and the wooden box had entered into the Black Tower. He did not enter into the Black Tower at the first instant, but instead chose to stand up and leave. Since it was already in the Black Tower, it was destined to belong to him, and no one could possibly take it from him. He returned to his own courtyard in the academy, closed the door, and finally entered the Black Tower. If it was in his last life, it would be a piece of cake for him to open a box made of Connect Origin Heartwood with his cultivation as a Heaven Tier elite. But the cultivation of the gushing spring tear was far from enough to do so. Otherwise, how would Suku Exine have been unable to do anything with the box even after so many years of it being in her possession? She was in the spiritual ocean tier, after all. However, in the Black Tower, Ling Han was a god. With a single thought, the wooden box was opened, as easy and simple as if he had just merely flipped his hand. Within the box was a piece of jade in the shape of a strip. As soon as the box was opened, a strong fragrance wafted out that caused his spirit to be roused and feel all the pores on his whole body open up. A hint of excitement appeared on Ling Han's face. This was not jade, but a medicinal ointment, 100 poison jade ointment. I never thought that something like this would still exist. He pressed down with a hand, and all the fragrance was suppressed back into the box. He could control everything in the Black Tower, as if he was a god. 100 poison jade ointment was not naturally formed, but had to be blended later. It required up to 100 poisonous ingredients, as well as 7 fragrance jade to be mixed with a secret method. This was not poison. If anyone used this to poison anyone else, that would be a humongous waste. If any single one of these 100 poisonous ingredients were used on its own, then even elites of the flower blossoming tier would die of poison. However, put together and blended with a wondrous ratio, they would suppress each other's poison, and what was supposed to be a deadly poison would be transformed into an excellent medicine. The more poisonous they were, the more plentiful this energy would naturally be. However, if anyone were to directly swallow it as it was now, that would definitely be a direct path to death, because the energy that originated from the mixture of these 100 poisonous ingredients was too terrifying. It would be a piece of cake for even a flower blossoming tier elite to burst from it. However, if it was added together with 7 fragrance jade, then the violent, explosive energy could be released in a calm, peaceful way, and would thus allow it to be absorbed. Naturally, 100 poison jade ointment was not to be swallowed, but rather rubbed on one's body. It would enter into the body by being absorbed through the skin. One could still eat it, but when these 100 poisons entered one's stomach, they would still cause a corresponding effect on the body. What was amazing was that one with higher cultivation level could rub in more of it, whereas those with a lower cultivation level should rub in less, and it could be used by people in different cultivation levels. It would allow one to increase one's cultivation level, strengthen the physique, and was an extremely valuable treasure. It was easy to find the poisonous ingredients, but 7 fragrance jade was much too rare. Even in his last life, when he had had so many resources in his grasp, he had only managed to blend it once, and the amount produced could not compare to this strip that he now had. Such a treasure indeed needed to be sealed by Connect Origin Heartwood. Otherwise, the medicinal effects would disperse very quickly and could not be kept for even a single month. He had no idea who it was that was so wealthy that he actually had a box made of Connect Origin Heartwood and 100 poison jade ointment buried with him. This was practically a waste of colossal proportions. Just in time to benefit me, Ling Han said with a smile as he removed his clothing and began to rub in the 100 poison jade ointment onto his body. A cooling feeling gushed out, relaxing his whole body. Feng Yin seemed to be very sure of himself. He seems confident that he'd be able to defeat me after 10 days. Now that I think of it, the basis for his confidence should be that he would be able to break through within these 10 days. Cultivation tiers were a different level before, so there is a big difference between having broken through and not yet broken through. As Ling Han sat in a cross-legged position, he continued to circulate the 5 elements heaven grade skill to absorb the medicinal effects. Within the Black Tower, he could even detain the ointment's effects and ensure it was entirely used on him without the slightest bit being wasted. This was a very shocking thing. If the medicinal effects could be absorbed completely, this was practically scary. There is only 10 days left until the martial arts tournament. I can't possibly break through to the spiritual ocean tier in such a short time, but every little bit of my ability I can increase counts. I am definitely going to get the Eye of Truth. After only a while, Ling Han felt his whole body heat up. The ointment was now completely effective, and he felt as if his skin was about to tear as he felt an extraordinary agony. Fuck, I have no experience, so I rubbed in too much. He bared his teeth. Though he had also mixed the 100 poison jade ointment in his last life, he had used it on his 4 disciples. At that time, even the weakest of the 4 of them was already in the spiritual pedestal tier. He had decreased the amount, but there was still a very far gap between the gushing spring tier and the spiritual pedestal tier, so it still caused him to exclaim. Thankfully, he had cultivated the body of rock cliff. Not only was his defense terrifyingly strong, he could even transform into rock and cut off his feelings of pain. When he actively circulated it, the agony instantly disappeared, but he could clearly see cracks appear on his skin and fresh blood seep out of his wounds. He found a bit of joy in his suffering as he thought that, fortunately, he had not rubbed it on that important place. Otherwise, he would really want to cry now. Hong, there was a powerful energy spreading out in his body, stimulating the continuous expansion of his spring, which gushed out waves of origin power. After about 3 hours, Ling Han stopped. The ointment that he had rubbed on his body was completely absorbed, and his cultivation level had gone up to the late stage of the 5th layer of the gushing spring tier. By the day of the martial arts tournament, his cultivation should be able to reach the 8th layer of the gushing spring tier. If it's the 8th layer against the spiritual ocean tier, I should manage. Ling Han nodded. His condition was a bit special, as his battle prowess far exceeded his cultivation level. With the circulation of the indestructible heaven scroll, the wounds on his body healed very quickly. He summoned clear water and washed off the blood stains on his body, then dressed. Hunyo actually did not come pester him today. Instead, she was very obediently sitting inside the Black Tower. Ling Han's divine sense swept over the little girl was actually in the process of breaking through to gushing spring tier. A 5-year-old in the gushing spring tier. Just the thought of it would make one dumbstruck. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.